You don't matter anymore, Mom, but don't worry, we're taking care of everything. Those words, delivered with a smile across a crystal wine glass at my own dining table, shattered 40 years of motherhood in a single breath. My son Ethan said it so gently, so kindly, that for a moment I almost thanked him. Almost. But here's what nobody tells you about family betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with screaming or slamming doors. It arrives in expensive suits, with perfect manners, speaking the language of concern, while quietly dismantling your entire existence. I'm Marianne Holloway, and this is the story of how I lost everything to the people I loved most, and how I took it all back. If you want to see how far this story travels, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. Let's see where we all are in this together. The Waterford chandelier cast prismatic light across the mahogany table. The same table where I'd served thousands of family meals, celebrated birthdays, hosted holidays, built a life. Now, sitting at its head, I felt like a stranger at my own funeral. Mother, you're not listening. Sabrina's voice had that particular edge she reserved for people she considered obstacles. My daughter-in-law had perfected the art of making concern sound like condemnation. I am listening, I said quietly, setting down my fork. The Dover sole on my plate had gone cold. I'd lost my appetite somewhere between the soup course and the moment Ethan suggested I was becoming forgetful. Then you understand why this makes sense. Sabrina smiled, but her eyes remained calculating. She wore a cream Chanel suit that probably cost more than my monthly expenses. Everything about her screamed control, from her severely pulled back hair to the way she positioned her chair, angled slightly toward Ethan, presenting a united front. Ethan reached across the table, covering my hand with his. His palm felt warm, familiar. This was my son, my boy. The child I'd rocked through nightmares, cheered through soccer games, put through Cornell on a teacher's salary after his father died. Mom, we're only trying to be kind to you. Don't think you don't matter. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kind. Matter. Two words that should have comforted me, but instead felt like a diagnosis. I never said I didn't matter. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Of course not. Sabrina's laugh was light, dismissive. But you have to admit, things have been slipping. The incident with the stove last month. I left a burner on once, I interrupted. Once, Sabrina, in 45 years of cooking. And the bills, Ethan added gently. You paid the electric bill twice in January and forgot the water bill entirely. Had I? The truth was, I couldn't remember. The days had started blurring together after Harold died 3 years ago. The big Victorian we'd restored together felt too large, too empty, too full of ghosts. Maybe I'd gotten confused. We're not criticizing you, Sabrina said, though that's exactly what it felt like. We're worried. That's what family does. We look out for each other. I wanted to ask when looking out had become looking over, when protection had turned into possession. But I stayed silent because good mothers don't make their children feel guilty for caring. The house is too much for you, Ethan continued. His eyes, Harold's eyes, looked at me with such pity that I wanted to scream. 5 bedrooms, 3 floors, that massive garden. You can barely manage the stairs anymore. I manage fine. But even as I said it, I remembered this morning, pausing halfway up to catch my breath, my knee aching from the old injury I'd never properly treated because there was always someone else who needed the doctor more. Mom! Ethan's voice dropped into that patient tone I recognized from his courtroom work. He was a corporate attorney, successful, ruthless when he needed to be. I'd been so proud. Let us help you. That's all we're asking. Help how exactly? I met his gaze directly, searching for my son beneath the lawyer. Sabrina pulled out a tablet, swiping it to life with manicured fingers. We found a wonderful community, Meadowbrook Estates. It's only 20 minutes from our house, so we can visit regularly. They have activities, a dining room, nurses on staff. You're talking about a nursing home. The words tasted bitter. An independent living facility, Sabrina corrected smoothly. Very different. You'd have your own apartment. But there's support when you need it. No more worrying about maintenance, cooking, bills. I like cooking. This is my home. I looked around the dining room, the wallpaper I'd chosen, the built-in cabinets Harold had refinished by hand, the window seat where I'd read to Ethan when he was small. Your father and I... Dad's gone, Mom. Ethan's words were gentle but absolute. He's been gone 3 years. You can't keep living in the past. Something cold settled in my chest. When had my history become the past? When had my memories turned into evidence of incompetence? I'm 68 years old, I said carefully. Not 88. I don't need assisted living. Not yet, Sabrina agreed. But why wait for a crisis? This is about planning ahead, being smart. Being smart. As if I had been stupid my entire life. As if the woman who'd taught architecture at 3 universities, who'd designed community centers and affordable housing, who'd balanced budgets and raised a child alone after Harold's heart attack, as if that woman had suddenly lost all capacity for rational thought. And the house? I asked quietly. What happens to it? Ethan and Sabrina exchanged a look. In that glance, I saw months of private conversations, plans made without me, decisions already finalized. We'd handle the sale, Ethan said. Obviously, the market's strong right now. We could easily get 1.2, maybe 1.3 million. After fees and taxes, that would give you a comfortable nest egg. More than enough for Meadowbrook and then some. 1.3 million. Harold and I had paid $42,000 for this house in 1981. We'd poured our lives into every renovation, every repair. I'd sanded floors while pregnant. Harold had rewired the second story himself, learning from library books because we couldn't afford an electrician. And where does the money go? I heard myself ask. Into a trust, obviously, Sabrina said, for your protection. We'd manage it, make sure you never have to worry about finances again. There it was. The truth hiding inside all the kindness. You want my house and my money. I said it flatly, watching their faces. Mom, that's not, Ethan started, but Sabrina cut him off. Marianne, I understand this is emotional, but let's be practical. You're not getting younger. What happens if you fall? If you have a stroke? If dementia sets in? She leaned forward, her expression softening into something that might have passed for compassion. Right now, you can make these choices with dignity. Wait too long, and a court might make them for you. The threat was wrapped in silk, but it was still a threat. Is that what you think? I looked at my son. That I'm incompetent? No. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. We think you need support. There's no shame in that. Shame. Another word that felt like a weapon. I raised you alone after your father died, I said quietly. I worked full-time, got my master's degree at night, kept this house running, put you through college. I did that at 45. But now, at 68, I'm supposed to believe I can't manage my own life? That was different, Ethan said. You were younger, stronger. I'm not an invalid. Nobody said you were, Sabrina interjected smoothly. But why struggle? You've earned the right to rest. Let us carry the burden for a while. Rest. Such a gentle word for erasure. I need to think about this, I said, standing. My legs felt unsteady, but I refused to let them see. Of course. Sabrina's smile was understanding, patient. Take your time, we're not trying to rush you. But they were. I could feel the pressure in every careful word, every concerned glance. This lunch wasn't a discussion, it was a closing argument, and I was the defendant. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing air, needing space. Through the doorway, I could hear them talking in lowered voices. Being stubborn. Expected resistance. Give her a week, then we push harder. Push harder. The phrase made my hands shake as I gripped the counter. This was my son, the boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and helped with algebra homework. The teenager who'd sobbed in my arms when his father died, who'd promised we'd take care of each other always. When had that changed? Or had I been too blind to see it happening? I thought back over the past year, the small ways Ethan had started inserting himself into my life, asking about my bills, suggesting I shouldn't drive at night, recommending I close the savings account Harold had left me and consolidate everything for simplicity. I thought he was being caring, attentive, a good son. But maybe I'd been watching my own life get boxed up for sale, one gentle suggestion at a time. The kitchen door swung open. Sabrina entered with our empty plates, her heels clicking on the tile. Let me help with those, I said automatically. Don't be silly. You cooked. I'll clean. She set the dishes in the sink, then turned to face me, her expression shifting to something more direct. Marianne, can I be honest with you? woman to woman? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted her honesty. Ethan loves you, but he's terrified. She lowered her voice. His father's death was so sudden. One minute Harold was fine, the next he was gone. Ethan carries that trauma. The idea of losing you, of not being prepared, of you being alone in this house if something happens, it keeps him up at night. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. I'd been so focused on my own feelings, I hadn't considered Ethan's fear. But then Sabrina continued, That's why we need to do this now, while you're still capable of understanding, before you decline further. She touched my arm, her grip firm. I know you don't see it yet, but the forgetfulness, the confusion, it's starting. My grandmother was the same way. She fought us too, insisted she was fine right up until she left the gas on and nearly killed herself. I'm not your grandmother. No, Sabrina agreed, which is why you can still make the smart choice. Sign the house over while you have capacity. Let us set up the trust. Move to Meadowbrook before winter. That's when elderly falls spike, you know. We've done all the research, handled all the details. All you have to do is agree. All I had to do was surrender. And if I don't? I asked quietly. Sabrina's smile thinned. Then we'll be forced to pursue other options, legal ones, for your own protection, of course. There it was again. Protection. The word they kept using to dress up control. I see. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. I hope you do. Sabrina squeezed my arm once more, then released me. We're family, Marianne. We want what's best for you. Sometimes that means making hard choices, but we'll do it together, as long as you cooperate. Cooperate. Comply. Surrender. She left me standing in the kitchen, my kitchen, in my house, feeling like a visitor in my own life. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. Harold had planted those rose bushes the summer before he died. I'd maintained them alone for 3 years, pruning, feeding, protecting them through harsh winters. They bloomed every June, pink and white and yellow, proof that I could nurture life even in grief. How long before Ethan and Sabrina dug them up? How long before some new family moved in and painted over the growth marks on the doorframe where we'd measured Ethan's height each birthday? How long before every trace of Harold, of me, of the life we'd built, was erased? Mom? Ethan appeared in the doorway. You okay? Was I? I didn't know anymore. Just tired, I said. He crossed to me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. He was tall now, solid, successful. Nothing like the scared 13-year-old who'd needed me desperately when Harold died. I know this is hard, he murmured into my hair, but I promise, we're doing the right thing. You'll see. A year from now, you'll be happier, safer. You won't be so alone. Alone. I was about to say I wasn't alone. I had friends, book club, the historical society, but then I realized I'd been canceling those commitments for months. Too tired, too sad, too much effort. Maybe I was alone. Maybe they were right. Come back to the table, Ethan said. Sabrina made her famous tiramisu, your favorite. It wasn't my favorite. My favorite was Harold's apple pie made from his mother's recipe. But Harold was gone, and apparently my preferences had gone with him. I let Ethan lead me back to the dining room. Sabrina had already served dessert, 3 perfect portions on the china I'd received as a wedding gift 46 years ago. There she is. Sabrina's smile was warm, victorious. We were just talking about the timeline. We think late August would be ideal for the move. That gives you 3 months to sort through things, decide what to keep. 3 months? The tiramisu turned to ash in my mouth. Well, you can't keep much, Sabrina said reasonably. The Meadowbrook apartments are only 800 square feet, but that's freeing, really. No more clutter, just the essentials. Essentials. My whole life, reduced to essentials that someone else would choose. What happens to everything else? I asked. The furniture, the books, Harold's things. We'll handle it, Ethan assured me. Estate sale, probably. Donations. Whatever makes sense. Estate sale. The phrase people used for dead people's belongings. There's no rush on the house sale itself, Sabrina continued, scrolling through her tablet. We can list it in September after you're settled. That way you won't have to deal with showings and open houses. We'll manage everything. They had it all planned, every detail, every step. My future, mapped out without me. I haven't agreed to any of this, I said. Not yet, Sabrina said. But you will. Because deep down you know it's right. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. Her skin was smooth, her nails perfect. You're a smart woman, Marianne. That's what made you such a good architect. You understand structure, foundation, planning. Apply that same logic here. What does the blueprint of your future look like if you stay in this house alone? I tried to picture it, tried to see myself at 70, 75, 80, climbing these stairs, maintaining this garden, living among Harold's ghosts. The image wouldn't form. And if you come with us, Sabrina continued, you have security, community, family nearby. Isn't that worth more than stubbornness? Stubbornness. Is that what self-determination had become? Think about it, Ethan said, standing. We should go. I have an early deposition tomorrow, but we'll call you this week, okay? Talk through the details, answer any questions. They were leaving, making their exit before I could properly process, properly object. This was strategic, I realized. Overwhelm and retreat. Leave me spinning. I walked them to the door, accepted Sabrina's air kiss, endured Ethan's hug. Love you, Mom, he said. This is going to be good for you. Trust me. Then they were gone, and I was alone in the foyer, listening to Ethan's Mercedes purr to life in the driveway. Trust me. I used to. Implicitly. Without question. Now, standing in the silence of my own home, I wasn't sure what I trusted anymore. I walked through the house slowly, seeing it through their eyes. The worn carpet on the stairs, the outdated kitchen cabinets, the wallpaper that was probably unfashionable now, though it had been so expensive in 1985. Was this house a prison, or was it the last thing I had left that was truly mine? In the study, I found Harold's reading chair, his pipe still in the ashtray beside it. I'd kept it exactly as he left it the morning he died. Ethan said I was living in a museum. Maybe he was right, or maybe grief didn't follow other people's timelines. I sank into the chair, breathing in the faint scent of tobacco and old leather. If Harold were here, what would he say? Would he tell me to hold on or let go? But Harold wasn't here, and I had to decide alone. The phone rang. I considered not answering, but habit won. Marianne, it's Carol. My friend's voice was bright, cheerful. I haven't seen you at book club in ages. We miss you. I've been busy, I lied. Too busy for your friends? Carol laughed. Come on, we're reading that new mystery you'd love. Thursday at 7. Say you'll come. Thursday. 3 days away. Could I even remember to show up? Or would I forget, like I'd supposedly forgotten the water bill? I'll try, I said noncommittally. You'll try, or you'll come, Carol pressed. Because I'll try is what people say when they mean no. Was it? Had I been saying no to life without realizing it? I'll be there, I said, surprising myself. Good. And Marianne? Are you okay? You sound off. Off, broken, confused, diminished. I'm fine, I said automatically, just tired. After we hung up, I sat in Harold's chair until the light faded and the house grew dark around me. I didn't turn on the lamps. I just sat, thinking about all the ways a life could disappear. It happened slowly, I realized. Not all at once. First you stop going out, then you stop making plans. Then you let other people make decisions because it's easier than fighting. Then one day you wake up and you're not a person anymore. You're a problem that needs managing. Was that what I'd become? A problem? The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9 times. Harold had restored that clock himself, spending months on the mechanism. Ethan and Sabrina would probably sell it at the estate sale. Some stranger would buy it, never knowing the hours Harold had invested, the pride he'd felt when it finally worked. Everything would be scattered, sold, forgotten, unless I stopped it. The thought came quietly, but it rooted deep. I stood, my knee protesting, and walked to the desk where I kept important papers. My hand shook as I pulled out the folder marked property deed. The house was in my name only. Harold had insisted on that after his father lost everything in a bad business deal. Always protect yourself, he'd said. Always have something that's just yours. I thought it was morbid at the time. Now I understood. This house was mine. Legally, completely, undeniably mine. Ethan couldn't force me to sell it. Sabrina couldn't force me into Meadowbrook. Not unless they could prove I was incompetent. The word made me flinch. Was I? The forgotten bills, the burned burner, were those signs of decline or just ordinary mistakes anyone could make? I needed clarity. I needed to know if I was fighting for my rights or denying reality. I picked up the phone and dialed my doctor's office. It was after hours, but I left a message requesting a full cognitive assessment. Whatever the results showed, at least I'd know the truth. Then I called my lawyer. Well, Harold's lawyer, Richard Morrison, who'd handled our wills and estate planning years ago. He answered on the third ring, his voice gravelly with age. "Marianne? Been a while. Richard, I need your advice." My voice steadied as I spoke. If someone wanted to take control of my assets against my will, what would they need to prove? There was a pause. Then, are we talking hypothetically, or is this about Ethan? So he'd seen this before. How many other children had he watched try to dispossess their parents? "Just tell me what I need to know," I said. "Come to my office tomorrow," Richard said. 10 a.m. And Marianne, don't sign anything until we talk. Nothing. Understood? Understood. I hung up, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Clean, sharp, clarifying anger. They thought I was fading, forgettable, easy to manage. They were about to learn differently. I spent the rest of the evening going through files, organizing papers, documenting everything. Bank statements, medical records, property taxes I'd paid on time every year, bills that showed I'd only missed one payment in 3 years, hardly evidence of incompetence. By midnight, I had a clear picture. I was financially stable, medically sound, and legally entitled to every decision about my own life. They'd counted on me being too confused, too tired, too compliant to fight back. They'd miscalculated. The next morning, I dressed carefully. The navy suit I'd worn to Harold's funeral, pressed and professional. I styled my hair, applied makeup, chose the pearl earrings Harold had given me for our 20th anniversary. I looked in the mirror and saw not a victim, but a woman who'd survived loss, raised a child alone, built a career, maintained a home. I saw someone worth fighting for. Richard's office was downtown, in one of the old buildings I'd helped preserve during my tenure on the Historical Commission. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd fought to save architectural history, while my own son tried to erase my personal one. Richard looked older than I remembered, his hair fully white now, but his eyes were sharp. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. The lunch, the suggestions, the timeline they'd created without me, the trust they wanted to control, the house they wanted to sell, the facility where they wanted to park me until I died quietly and conveniently. Richard listened without interrupting, making notes in his precise handwriting. When I finished, he sat back and sighed. They're following the standard playbook. Create urgency, manufacture concern, isolate the target, then strike when resistance is lowest. "The target?" I repeated. "That's what I am?" "To them, right now, yes." He leaned forward. "But legally, you're still autonomous. They can't force you into assisted living. They can't force you to sell your house. They can't access your money without your permission." Sabrina mentioned legal options. "For my protection." "She means guardianship," Richard said bluntly. "They'd petition the court to declare you incapacitated, then take legal control of your person and your estate." The words hit like a physical blow. They'd really do that? "If you resist, probably." Richard's expression was grim. "I've seen it dozens of times. Adult children who convince themselves they're helping while they systematically strip their parents of autonomy and assets." "But I'm not incapacitated." "Then prove it," Richard said. "Get a full medical and cognitive evaluation. Document your competence. And Marianne, prepare for this to get ugly. Because once you say no, once you assert your rights, the kindness will drop and you'll see who they really are." I thought about Ethan's hug yesterday, his gentle voice, his apparent concern. Was any of it real? Or had I been loving a performance while the real Ethan planned my obsolescence? "What do I do?" I asked quietly. Richard pulled out a fresh legal pad. "First, we make sure all your assets are protected. Any joint accounts with Ethan?" "The emergency fund," I said. "He insisted we set it up last year in case I needed quick access to cash." "Close it," Richard said. "Today. Transfer everything to an account in your name only." He'll be furious. He'll get over it, or he won't. Either way, it's your money. Richard continued writing. "Next, we review your will and power of attorney. If Ethan's named as your POA, we revoke it and designate someone else. Who? I didn't have siblings. My parents were long dead. My friends were lovely, but would they really want this responsibility? We'll figure it out, Richard said. Maybe a professional fiduciary. The point is, Ethan can't have legal authority over you. Each step felt like a betrayal. But which was worse? Betraying my son's expectations or betraying myself? There's something else, Richard said carefully. If they do pursue guardianship, you'll need character witnesses. People who can testify to your competence, your independence, your sound judgment. Start rebuilding those connections. Be visible, active. Give them nothing to use against you. So I'd been right to accept Carol's invitation to book club. I needed to rejoin life, not just to prove a point, but to remember I had one worth fighting for. I left Richard's office with a list of tasks and a strange sense of purpose. For years I'd been drifting. Now I had direction. It wasn't the direction I'd wanted, but it was mine. Over the next week, I executed Richard's plan with methodical precision. I closed the joint account, transferred the funds, changed my passwords, updated my will. Each action felt simultaneously empowering and devastating. This was my son, my only child, and I was treating him like a threat, because he was one. The realization hit during my cognitive assessment at Dr. Patterson's office. She walked me through memory tests, problem-solving exercises, coordination checks. I scored normally on everything. No signs of dementia, no cognitive decline beyond normal age-related changes. You're sharp as ever, Marianne, Dr. Patterson said, reviewing the results. Whatever's going on with your family, it's not your mental state. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something darker. Confirmation that Ethan and Sabrina's concern was fabricated. They weren't worried about my decline. They were engineering it. The call came that Thursday, right before I was supposed to leave for book club. Mom, we need to talk. Ethan's voice was tight, controlled. What the hell did you do? I closed our joint account, I said calmly. It was my money. I moved it to my own account. Without telling me? Without discussing it? His anger crackled through the phone. Do you have any idea how that looks? How unstable that makes you seem? Unstable. There was the word I'd been waiting for. It's my money, Ethan. I can manage it how I choose. Can you? His voice dropped to something colder. Because from where I'm standing, you're making erratic decisions, paranoid ones. This is exactly the kind of behavior we were worried about. Who's we? I asked. You and Sabrina? Or you and the guardianship attorney you've already consulted? Silence. Then, Richard Morrison called you. Richard is my lawyer, not yours. He's a senile old man who should have retired years ago. Ethan's words came fast now, angry. Mom, listen to me. You're being manipulated. Richard sees a billable hours opportunity, and he's turning you against your own family. Nobody turned me against anyone, I interrupted. I turned toward myself. There's a difference. This is insane. I heard Sabrina's voice in the background saying something sharp. Then Ethan again. We're coming over, tonight. We need to discuss this in person. No, I said simply. You're not. Excuse me? This is my home, Ethan. You don't get to demand entry anymore. If you want to visit, you ask. Politely. And accept that I might say no. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, You're going to regret this. The line went dead. I stood holding the phone, my heart hammering. That wasn't my son speaking. That was someone else, someone who'd been hiding behind gentle suggestions and concerned smiles. That was the person who'd been planning to take everything. I made it to book club, though my hands shook through the entire discussion. Carol noticed, pulling me aside afterward. What's going on? She asked. And don't say nothing. So I told her. Everything. The lunch, the plans, the threats. Carol's expression shifted from shock to fury. That absolute bastard. After everything you did for him? He thinks he's helping, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. Then he's delusional, Carol snapped. Marianne, you need support. Real support, not whatever twisted version Ethan's selling. Let me make some calls. There are people who can help. Elder care advocates, legal resources. I have a lawyer. You need more than that. You need witnesses, documentation, a paper trail showing you're perfectly capable. Carol squeezed my hand. And you need friends who'll testify to that if it comes to court. Which I will. Gladly. Tears stung my eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me for basic human decency, Carol said. That's what got you into this mess. Being grateful for the bare minimum. Start expecting more, demanding more. You're worth it. Was I? Some days I wasn't sure. But I was starting to remember that once I had been. Before Harold died. Before grief made me small. Before I started disappearing piece by piece. Maybe it was time to reappear. The next Sunday, Ethan and Sabrina showed up unannounced. I watched from the upstairs window as they pulled into the driveway, Sabrina carrying what looked like legal folders. They rang the bell, knocked, called my cell phone. I didn't answer. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing. Choosing when and how and whether to engage. After 15 minutes, they left. But Sabrina tucked something into the mailbox. When they were gone, I retrieved it. A letter, written in Sabrina's precise handwriting on cream stationery. Marianne, we're deeply concerned about your recent behavior and the influence of your attorney. Your refusal to engage in reasonable conversation suggests cognitive decline that may require professional intervention. Please understand, we're pursuing this out of love. If you continue to resist appropriate care, we'll have no choice but to petition for emergency guardianship on the grounds of self-neglect and diminished capacity. This is your last opportunity to cooperate voluntarily. After this, the decision will be made for you. For your own good, Sabrina and Ethan. For your own good. The phrase people used when they'd run out of real justifications. I carried the letter inside and added it to the file Richard was building. Evidence. Documentation. Proof that this wasn't love. It was something else entirely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from Ethan's childhood, searching for the point where I'd failed him. Where had I taught him that people were problems to solve? That autonomy was negotiable? That love meant control? Or had I taught him nothing, and he'd learned this somewhere else? From Sabrina, from his law career, from a culture that saw elderly parents as burdens rather than people? Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the study. I pulled out old photo albums, looking at pictures of Ethan as a baby, a child, a teenager. In every image, I searched his eyes for signs of the man he'd become. But children's eyes only reflect what we want to see. And I'd wanted to see goodness so badly that I'd missed everything else. Or maybe the goodness had been real once, and somewhere along the way it had been buried under ambition and entitlement and the slow corruption of believing your intentions justified any action. Either way, the son I'd raised was gone, and I didn't know if I was mourning him or finally seeing him clearly for the first time. Dawn came gray and cold. I made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching the garden wake up. Harold's roses were budding. Another month and they'd bloom. I wanted to see them bloom, in this garden, in this house, on my terms. That meant fighting, really fighting. Not the polite resistance I'd offered so far, but full opposition. Legal, financial, emotional. It meant accepting that the family I'd built might break in the process. It meant choosing myself, even when that choice felt selfish. But maybe, after 46 years of marriage and 25 years of single motherhood and a lifetime of putting everyone else first, I'd earned the right to be selfish. Maybe that wasn't selfishness at all. Maybe it was survival. My phone rang. Richard Morrison. They filed, he said without preamble. Emergency guardianship petition. Hearings in 2 weeks. My chest tightened. On what grounds? Everything they could think of. Cognitive decline, self-neglect, financial mismanagement, isolation, refusal of medical care. All lies. But they're documented lies. They've got statements from Sabrina, from their housekeeper who claims you seemed confused during a visit, even from someone at your bank who says you asked the same question twice about your account. I was confirming information, I said. That's not confusion. I know, but they're spinning it. Richard's voice hardened. Marianne, this is war now. No more pretending it's a family disagreement. They want you declared incompetent, and they're willing to lie under oath to do it. Are you ready for that? Was I? Ready to sit in a courtroom while my son told a judge I was losing my mind? Ready to have my entire life examined, questioned, reduced to evidence and counter-evidence? Ready to fight for the right to exist as myself? Yes, I said. I'm ready. Good. because we have work to do. The next 2 weeks felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Every morning I woke up with my stomach in knots, wondering what fresh attack would come. Every night I lay awake cataloging my own competence, like evidence for a trial that hadn't happened yet. Richard had me keeping a daily log. What I ate, where I went, who I saw, what I did. Proof of independent living. It felt absurd, documenting myself like some endangered species. But he insisted. They're going to paint you as helpless, he'd said. We need to show the judge you're anything but. So I wrote it all down. Made breakfast, scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast. Paid the electric bill online, drove to the grocery store, met Carol for coffee, balanced my checkbook. Each mundane task became ammunition. The hearing was set for Thursday at 2 p.m. Richard assured me we had a strong case, but his confidence felt thin. He was 81 himself, fighting against younger lawyers with better resources and no qualms about lying. They'll bring up the burner you left on, he warned during one of our prep sessions. The bills you supposedly forgot. Make sure you have explanations ready. Calm ones. If you get defensive, you look unstable. So I practiced staying calm while my son tried to destroy me. Normal family stuff. Wednesday night, the phone rang at 11:30. I almost didn't answer, but some old maternal instinct made me pick up. Mom. Ethan's voice was rough, like he'd been drinking. Mom, please. We don't have to do this. My heart stuttered. Then drop the petition. I can't. He sounded miserable. Sabrina's right. You need help. You're just too stubborn to see it. I had a full cognitive evaluation, Ethan. I'm fine. One doctor's opinion doesn't mean anything. We've consulted specialists. You've consulted people who'll say what you pay them to say, I interrupted. My calm was slipping. I took a breath, steadied myself. This isn't about my health. This is about control. It's about protecting you from yourself. His voice hardened. You're making terrible decisions. Cutting off your own son, listening to that vulture Morrison. Richard's helped me see clearly for the first time in years. He's poisoning you against your own family, Ethan shouted. Then, quieter, Mom, I'm trying to save you. Why can't you see that? Because saving someone against their will is just another word for destroying them. But I didn't say that. Instead, save me from what exactly? From ending up alone and broke and forgotten in some state facility because you were too proud to accept help when it was offered. His words came fast, desperate. I've seen it happen, Mom. Elderly people who think they're fine until suddenly they're not, and by then all their money's gone to scammers or they've fallen and broken a hip and nobody finds them for days. So your solution is to take my money and put me in a facility yourself. A good facility, a safe one, where you'd be cared for. I don't need care. I need to be left alone. The silence stretched. Then Ethan said something that made my blood freeze. Tomorrow, the judge is going to ask if you've been taking your medications. What are you going to tell her? What medications? I'm not on anything except occasional ibuprofen. According to your medical records, you were prescribed antidepressants last year, after Dad died. Dr. Patterson noted you seemed withdrawn and disengaged, but there's no record of you filling the prescription. His voice took on that lawyer tone, the one that meant he was building to something. That's evidence of self-neglect, refusal of medical treatment. My hand shook. I didn't fill it because I didn't need it. I was grieving, not mentally ill. The judge won't see it that way, especially when we present evidence that your untreated depression has led to social isolation, poor self-care, and paranoid thinking. Paranoid. I laughed, but it came out broken. You're literally trying to steal my house and you're calling me paranoid. I'm trying to help you and you're so deep in Morrison's manipulation you can't see straight. He paused. Mom, last chance. Drop Morrison. Sign the papers. Move to Meadowbrook voluntarily. We'll cancel the hearing. Everything goes back to normal. Normal? I repeated. You mean I surrender everything and you get what you want? I want you safe. You want my money. The words hung between us like a grenade with the pin pulled. How dare you? Ethan's voice went cold. After everything I've done for you, every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every goddamn trip to check on you because you're too stubborn to admit you're failing. I'm not failing. You left the stove on. You forgot bills. You can't even remember conversations we've had. Because you're gaslighting me. The accusation burst out before I could stop it. You and Sabrina, making me doubt myself, acting like normal mistakes are signs of dementia. This is exactly the kind of paranoid delusion we're talking about. His voice turned pitying. Mom, listen to yourself. You sound unhinged. And maybe I did. Maybe that was the point. Push someone hard enough and their reaction becomes evidence against them. I have to go, I said. Wait. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone because I couldn't trust myself not to answer if he called back. I spent the rest of the night in Harold's chair, staring at nothing, trying to remember who I was before all this started, before grief, before doubt, before my own son became my enemy. The woman I'd been at 40 seemed like a stranger now, confident, capable, certain of her place in the world. What had happened to her? Had she died with Harold? Or had I killed her slowly, year by year, with small surrenders and lowered expectations and the quiet acceptance that my best days were behind me? Tomorrow, I'd have to resurrect her, walk into that courtroom and prove I was still whole, still competent, still worthy of autonomy. If I failed, everything ended. My home, my freedom, myself. If I succeeded, I'd still have to live with the fact that my son had tried to destroy me. Either way, I'd already lost something that could never be recovered. The morning of the hearing, I dressed like I was going to my own execution. Black suit, pearl necklace, low heels I could walk in without wobbling. I studied myself in the mirror and practiced looking stable. Stable? What a word. Like I was a building that might collapse. Carol picked me up at noon. She'd insisted on coming, even though she wasn't scheduled to testify until later if needed. You look good, she said. Professional? Competent? I looked terrified. Well, yeah, but competently terrified. She squeezed my hand. You're going to be fine. The truth is on your side. I wanted to believe her, but I'd learned lately that truth was negotiable when you had enough money and motivation to reshape it. The courthouse was downtown, one of those imposing granite buildings meant to intimidate. It worked. My legs felt weak as we climbed the steps. Richard met us in this hallway outside the courtroom. He looked every one of his 81 years today, but his eyes were sharp. They're already inside, he said. Ethan, Sabrina, and their lawyer, Philip Vance. He's a shark, specializes in elder law, specifically guardianship cases. He knows every trick. Great, I muttered. Here's what's going to happen, Richard continued, his voice low. Vance will try to rattle you, make you seem confused, emotional, unstable. Don't take the bait. Answer questions simply, directly. If you don't understand something, say so. That shows self-awareness, not incompetence. And Marianne? He looked at me hard. No matter what they say about you in there, no matter what Ethan claims, stay calm. Getting upset proves their point. So I had to sit quietly while my son lied about me. Perfect. We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic spaces you see on TV. The judge's bench was raised but not imposing. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Ethan and Sabrina sat at the petitioner's table with a man I assumed was Philip Vance, mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of face that looked trustworthy until you saw his eyes. Ethan glanced over as we entered. For just a second, something flickered across his face. Regret? Guilt? Or maybe just anxiety about whether his performance would be convincing enough. Then Sabrina whispered something to him, and the moment passed. His expression hardened into resolve. The bailiff called us to order. Judge Martha Reynolds entered, a black woman in her 60s with close-cropped gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every variety of human bullshit and wasn't impressed by any of it. I liked her immediately, then worried that was just wishful thinking. This is a petition for emergency guardianship, Judge Reynolds said, reviewing the file. Petitioners are Ethan Holloway and Sabrina Holloway seeking guardianship over Marianne Holloway. Mr. Vance, you may present your case. Philip Vance stood, buttoning his jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a difficult case for everyone involved. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway love Mrs. Holloway Sr. deeply. But love sometimes means making hard choices when a family member can no longer make sound decisions for themselves. I felt Richard tense beside me, but he stayed quiet. This was just the opening. We'll demonstrate through medical evidence, witness testimony, and Mrs. Holloway's own recent behavior that she's experiencing cognitive decline that poses a danger to herself and her assets, Vance continued smoothly. She's isolated herself from family and friends. She's made erratic financial decisions. She's refused appropriate medical care, and she's fallen under the influence of individuals who may not have her best interests at heart. Individuals. He meant Richard. We're not seeking to punish Mrs. Holloway or strip her of dignity, Vance said, his voice dripping false compassion. We're asking this court to ensure she receives the care and protection she needs. That's what family does. He sat down. Judge Reynolds turned to Richard. Mr. Morrison? Richard stood slowly, using the table for support. For a moment I worried he looked too old, too frail to fight this battle. Then he spoke, and his voice cut through the room like a blade. Your Honor, this case is a travesty. Mrs. Holloway is a 68-year-old woman in excellent health, both physical and mental. She holds advanced degrees. She had a distinguished career in architecture. She's managed her own finances for decades, including through the death of her husband 3 years ago. She's not incapacitated. She's inconvenient. Vance started to object, but Judge Reynolds held up a hand. Inconvenient to whom, Mr. Morrison? To her son and daughter-in-law, who have decided Mrs. Holloway's home and assets would be better managed by them. They've dressed up their greed as concern, but the evidence will show this petition is nothing more than an attempted theft disguised as guardianship. That's outrageous, Sabrina hissed, loud enough to carry. Judge Reynolds looked at her. Mrs. Holloway, you'll have a chance to testify. Until then, please remain quiet. Sabrina's face flushed, but she nodded. Richard continued. We have medical documentation showing Mrs. Holloway is cognitively sound. We have financial records showing she manages her money responsibly. We have witnesses who will testify to her independence and competence. What we don't have is any legitimate basis for this court to strip an autonomous adult of her fundamental rights. He sat down. Judge Reynolds made a note, then looked at Vance. Call your first witness. We called Dr. Gerald Ashford. A man in his 70s entered from the back. Gray beard, tweed jacket, the very picture of distinguished medical authority. He was sworn in and took the stand. Dr. Ashford, Vance began, can you describe your credentials? I'm a neuropsychologist specializing in age-related cognitive decline. I've practiced for 42 years and testified in over 300 guardianship cases. Of course he had, a professional witness. Have you evaluated Mrs. Marianne Holloway? I reviewed her medical records and spoke with family members about behavioral patterns. Richard was on his feet. Objection. The witness never actually examined Mrs. Holloway. Judge Reynolds frowned. Sustained. Dr. Ashford, did you conduct a direct evaluation? No, Your Honor. Mrs. Holloway refused to see me. Because I'd never been asked. I started to speak, but Richard touched my arm. Based on the information available, Ashford continued, I observed several concerning patterns. Social withdrawal following her husband's death, refusal of prescribed antidepressants, reports of memory issues including forgotten bills and repeated questions, recent paranoid ideation regarding family members. These are consistent with early-stage dementia, possibly complicated by untreated depression. My stomach dropped. He made it sound so clinical, so inevitable. In your professional opinion, Vance asked, is Mrs. Holloway capable of managing her own affairs? Without proper treatment and supervision? No, she's at significant risk of self-neglect, financial exploitation, and injury. Richard's cross-examination was brutal. Dr. Ashford, you testified you never met Mrs. Holloway, correct? That's correct. Never spoke to her directly? No. Never observed her in any setting? No, but yes or no, doctor? Ashford's jaw tightened. No. So your entire opinion is based on second-hand information provided by the very people seeking financial control over her. Is that accurate? I also reviewed medical records, which show no diagnosis of dementia, correct? Not yet formally diagnosed. Yes or no? No formal diagnosis, Ashford admitted. And the antidepressant Mrs. Holloway allegedly refused, that was prescribed when? Approximately 18 months ago. Following her husband's death? Yes. Is grief a mental illness, Dr. Ashford? No, but untreated depression. Is it malpractice for a patient to decline medication they don't feel they need? It can be evidence of poor judgment. Answer the question. Is it malpractice? No. Thank you. No further questions. Ashford stepped down, looking angry. Score 1 for our side. But we were just getting started. Vance called Sabrina next. She took the stand looking polished and sympathetic, every inch the concerned daughter-in-law. I wanted to vomit. Mrs. Holloway, Vance began gently, how long have you been married to Ethan? 12 years? And in that time, how has your relationship with your mother-in-law been? Wonderful. Marianne's been like a second mother to me. We're very close. She looked at me with practiced sadness. Or we were, until recently. Liar. We'd never been close. She'd tolerated me because she had to, and I'd tolerated her because I loved my son. Can you describe changes you've noticed in Mrs. Holloway's behavior over the past year? Sabrina sighed. It's been heartbreaking to watch. After Harold died, she just withdrew. Stopped seeing friends. Stopped taking care of herself. The house got messier. She'd forget things we just talked about. Can you give specific examples? Last Christmas, she forgot we were coming for dinner. We arrived and she hadn't cooked anything. Seemed genuinely surprised we were there. She'd call Ethan at work asking questions she'd already asked him that morning. Her bills started piling up unpaid. Sabrina's voice caught. We were terrified she'd lose the house, lose everything. I stared at her, stunned. That's not what happened. We'd agreed to have Christmas at their house that year because I'd been too tired to host. I'd never called Ethan repeatedly about anything. The bills, oh God. The one time I'd paid the electric bill twice because the online system glitched. That was her evidence? When did you become seriously concerned? Vance asked. Vance. When she started accusing us of trying to steal from her, making paranoid statements about how we were manipulating her, gaslighting her, terms she'd clearly gotten from somewhere else because they're not words she'd normally use. Sabrina leaned forward earnestly. We realized she was being influenced, probably by this attorney who saw a vulnerable widow with assets. That's when we knew we had to act. And your motivation in filing this petition? Love, Sabrina said simply. We love her. We want her safe and cared for. This isn't about money or property. It's about protecting someone who can't protect herself anymore. The performance was flawless. If I didn't know better, I'd believe her. Richard stood for cross-examination. He looked at Sabrina like she was something stuck to his shoe. Mrs. Holloway, you testified you and your mother-in-law were very close. Is that accurate? Yes. Then why, in 12 years of marriage, have you never once called her Mom or Marianne in casual conversation? You always refer to her as your mother when speaking to Ethan. Isn't that correct? Sabrina blinked. That's just semantics. Yes or no? I suppose, but, and this closeness, how often did you visit Mrs. Holloway before your husband inherited property from his aunt last year? Vance objected. Relevance? I'm establishing a pattern of interest coinciding with financial opportunity, Richard said. Judge Reynolds considered. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mrs. Holloway. Sabrina's composure cracked slightly. We visited regularly. Define regularly. Holidays, special occasions. So approximately 6 times a year. Does that sound right? I suppose. And after the inheritance, which made your household financially solvent for the first time in your marriage, you suddenly started visiting weekly, making suggestions about Mrs. Holloway's living situation, offering to help with her finances. Isn't that accurate? We were concerned. You were circling, Richard said flatly. Let's talk about the Christmas dinner you claim Mrs. Holloway forgot. Do you have the text exchange where you and she agreed to host it at your house instead? Sabrina went pale. I don't recall. I have it right here. Richard held up his phone. Submitted as evidence. Your message, November 20th. Marianne, why don't we host this year? Give you a break. Her response, that would be lovely, thank you. So she didn't forget Christmas dinner. You lied. I misspoke under oath. In a court proceeding to strip your mother-in-law of her rights. Richard's voice could have cut glass. What else have you misspoken about? Vance was objecting, Judge Reynolds was sustaining, but the damage was done. Sabrina stepped down looking shaken. Then it was Ethan's turn. Watching my son take the stand felt surreal. This was the boy I'd rocked to sleep, taught to tie his shoes, driven to soccer practice. The teenager I'd talked through his first heartbreak. The young man who'd sobbed at his father's funeral and promised we'd always take care of each other. Now he wouldn't meet my eyes. Vance led him through the same narrative. Mom's declining. We're worried. We're only trying to help. Ethan delivered it all with perfect sincerity, and I wondered if he actually believed it, or if he'd just practiced enough to make the lie feel true. "Mr. Holloway," Vance said, "tell the court about the incident with the stove." Ethan nodded. "I stopped by to check on her about 6 weeks ago. When I walked in, I smelled gas. Mom had turned on a burner to make tea, then apparently forgot and went upstairs. The burner had been on for at least 30 minutes with nothing on it. How did Mrs. Holloway react when you pointed this out?" "She was defensive, said it was just a mistake, could happen to anyone, but it scared me. What if I hadn't stopped by? What if she'd gone to bed and the house caught fire?" His voice thickened with emotion. "I can't lose her the way I lost Dad. I can't." The emotion seemed genuine. Maybe it was. Maybe he really did believe he was saving me. That almost made it worse. Richard's cross-examination was quieter this time. Gentler. He knew this was the dangerous part. Pushing too hard would make him look like he was attacking a grieving son. "Mr. Holloway, you love your mother, correct?" "Of course." Ethan finally looked at me, his eyes wet. "I love her more than anything." "Then let's talk about what love looks like." Richard moved closer. "You mentioned your father's death. That was sudden, correct?" "Yes, heart attack. He was gone in minutes." "Traumatic for you?" "Very." "And for your mother?" "Devastating. They'd been married 43 years. "How did she handle it? The immediate aftermath?" Ethan hesitated. "She was strong, handled all the arrangements, dealt with the estate, kept it together." "Did she ask you for help with any of that?" "No, she said she needed to do it herself, to stay busy." "And in the 3 years since, has she asked you for financial help? Food, housing, transportation?" "No." "Has she missed any bills that resulted in shutoffs or legal action?" "Not that I know of." "Has she had any accidents requiring medical care?" "No, but yes or no, Mr. Holloway?" "No." "So this woman who you claim can't care for herself has actually been managing quite well for 3 years as a widow, correct?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's been hiding how bad it is. Or perhaps she's been doing exactly what she's always done, living independently as a competent adult." Richard paused. "Let me ask you something else. In the past year, have you and your wife discussed what you might do with the proceeds from selling your mother's house?" Vance objected immediately. "Irrelevance and improper speculation." "It goes to motive, Your Honor," Richard argued. "I'll allow it," Judge Reynolds said. "Answer the question, Mr. Holloway." Ethan looked trapped. "We've discussed future planning. Specifically, have you and your wife discussed how selling the house would allow you to pay off your student loans and invest in a vacation property?" Silence. "Mr. Holloway?" "We may have mentioned it," Ethan said finally, "but that's not why." "Of course not," Richard said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "One more question. When you filled out the petition for emergency guardianship, you checked the box indicating your mother poses an imminent danger to herself. In what way is she dangerous?" "She's being taken advantage of by you," Ethan shot back. "You're manipulating a vulnerable woman for your fees. "I'm working pro bono," Richard said calmly. "Next assumption?" Ethan had no answer. Judge Reynolds called a 15-minute recess. Carol bought me terrible courthouse coffee, and we sat on a bench in the hallway. "You're doing great," she said. "Reynolds sees through them." "Does she?" I couldn't tell. The judge's face revealed nothing. Ethan looked awful up there, and Sabrina basically admitted she lied. But what if it's not enough? My hands shook around the styrofoam cup. What if the judge thinks a son wouldn't destroy his mother without cause? What if she decides it's safer to just give them what they want? "Then we appeal," Carol said fiercely, "and we keep fighting until someone listens." But I was so tired of fighting. 3 years of grief, 2 weeks of legal warfare, and now this. I wanted it to be over. I wanted my son back. I wanted to wake up and discover this whole nightmare had been some grief-induced hallucination. Instead, I finished my coffee and walked back into the courtroom to fight for my right to exist. The afternoon session started with my testimony. Richard had prepped me extensively, But sitting in that witness box with everyone staring at me, especially Ethan, made my carefully practiced answers evaporate. Vance approached like a friendly uncle. "Mrs. Holloway, thank you for being here today." As if I'd had a choice. "Let's start simple. How old are you?" 68. "And you live alone?" "Yes." "Must be difficult. Big house, no one to help." "I manage fine." "Do you?" He consulted his notes. "You've lived in that house since 1981, correct?" "Yes." 45 years, long time. Lots of memories. "Yes?" Where was this going? Must be hard to imagine leaving it. "I'm not leaving it," I said firmly, "even if staying put you at risk." He tilted his head sympathetically. "Mrs. Holloway, when's the last time you had the furnace inspected?" I blinked. The fall. October, I think." "You think?" "October," I said more firmly, though now I wasn't sure. "Do you have documentation of that?" "I'd have to check my files." "So you don't know offhand when critical safety systems were last maintained?" He made it sound damning. "What about the roof? Any leaks?" "There was a small leak last winter. I had it patched." "By whom?" "A contractor. His name was—" Why couldn't I remember? Mike something? Or Mark? "You don't remember the name of someone who worked on your house?" "It was months ago." "Yet you're certain you can manage this property alone." Vance's smile was gentle, deadly. "Let's talk about medications. Your doctor prescribed antidepressants in January of last year. Why didn't you fill the prescription?" "I didn't need them." "But your doctor thought you did." "Doctors suggest things. Patients can decline. Even when declining might worsen your condition, make you more isolated, more confused." "I wasn't confused." "Then why did you pay your electric bill twice in 1 month? The website glitched. Or you forgot you'd already paid it." "No, I stopped, took a breath. Stay calm. The payment didn't show as processed, so I submitted it again. When both went through, I called and got a refund. That's not confusion, that's reasonable caution." Vance moved on before I could feel victorious. "You've accused your son and daughter-in-law of trying to steal from you. Why?" "Because they filed this petition to take control of my assets." "Before the petition, did you make these accusations?" I hesitated. Had I? I'd felt it, but had I said it out loud? "Mrs. Holloway?" I expressed concern about their motivations. Using words like gaslighting and manipulation, where did you learn those terms? "I read. I watched television. They're not obscure words." Or perhaps your attorney suggested them? Helped you construct a narrative of victimhood to resist reasonable help? "Objection," Richard called. Argumentative. Sustained. But the seed was planted. I could see it in how Vance smiled. He spent another 20 minutes picking apart my life. Why hadn't I replaced the carpet in the upstairs hall? Because it was perfectly fine. Why did I sometimes skip book club? Because I was allowed to. Why had I closed the joint account with Ethan without warning? Because it was my money. Every answer felt like a trap. Defend myself too vigorously, I seemed paranoid. Answer too simply, I seemed evasive. By the time Richard redirected, I was exhausted. "Mrs. Holloway," he asked gently, "do you want to live in your home?" "Yes." "Do you feel capable of doing so safely?" "Absolutely." "If you needed help, real help, not forced relocation, would you accept it?" "Of course. I'm not stubborn. I'm being sensible." "Thank you." Nothing further. I stepped down feeling like I'd barely survived. Judge Reynolds called the final witness, Carol, my character witness. Carol was perfect, articulate, credible, adamant that I was competent and independent. She described our book club discussions, my sharp observations, my reliability. Vance tried to shake her. "How often do you actually see Mrs. Holloway?" "Weekly, at minimum." "And in these visits, have you noticed any decline?" "In her tolerance for manipulation? Yes. Otherwise, no." Judge Reynolds almost smiled. When testimony concluded, both lawyers gave closing arguments. Vance painted me as a tragic figure, too proud to admit decline. Richard painted Ethan and Sabrina as opportunists dressed in concern. Then Judge Reynolds said the words I'd been dreading. I'll issue my ruling in writing within 48 hours. This hearing is adjourned. 48 hours. 2 days to wait, while someone else decided whether I remained a person or became a possession. Outside the courthouse, Ethan tried to approach me. Mom, don't. I didn't have the energy for whatever he wanted to say. Please, I need you to understand. You tried to have me declared incompetent, I said quietly. You lied under oath. There's nothing left to understand. His face crumpled. I was trying to help. Then you failed. I turned away before he could see me cry. Carol drove me home. We didn't talk. What was there to say? The house felt different when I walked in. Or maybe I felt different in it. This place I'd fought so hard to keep. Was it worth destroying my relationship with my son? Yes, a voice inside me whispered, because the alternative was destroying myself. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Was that Ethan's car? Were they coming to forcibly remove me before the judge could rule? Paranoid thinking, Vance would say. Evidence of incompetence. Or maybe just the rational response to being hunted by your own child. Thursday bled into Friday. No ruling. Saturday morning, Richard called. She's taking longer than expected. Could mean anything. Could mean she's trying to find a gentle way to destroy me. Could mean she's being thorough, Richard countered. Don't give up yet. But giving up felt easier than hope. Hope was exhausting. Saturday afternoon, I sat in Harold's chair and imagined my future. Both versions. In one, I stayed here until I died, alone but autonomous. In the other, I lived in an 800-square-foot apartment in Meadowbrook, surrounded by strangers, visiting Ethan on his terms, grateful for whatever scraps of dignity he allowed me. Which was worse? I was still trying to decide when the email arrived. Subject: Holloway guardianship ruling. My hand shook so badly I could barely click it open. Then I read the first line and the world tilted sideways. After thorough review of testimony and evidence, this court finds no basis for the appointment of a guardian. Petition denied. I read it 3 times before my brain processed the words. Denied. They'd lost. I'd won. My hands were shaking so hard I had to set the laptop down. I stood up, sat back down, stood again. The relief was so overwhelming it felt like drowning. I called Richard. He answered on the first ring. You saw. His voice was thick with emotion. I saw. She eviscerated them, Marianne. Read the full opinion. Reynolds called their case a transparently opportunistic attempt to exploit guardianship statutes for financial gain. Those were her exact words. I pulled up the full document, scrolling through pages of legal language until I found the section Richard meant. The court finds the petitioner's testimony to be inconsistent, contradictory, and in several instances deliberately misleading. Mrs. Holloway presented as articulate, oriented, and fully capable of managing her affairs. The characterization of normal age-related changes and isolated incidents as evidence of incompetence is not supported by the medical evidence and appears motivated by factors other than genuine concern for Mrs. Holloway's welfare. Other factors: money, property, control. The judge had seen right through them. There's more, Richard said. She's ordering them to pay your legal fees, and she's referred the case to the state bar for investigation into Vance's conduct. He might lose his license over this. Good, I said, and meant it. Let him explain to the ethics board why he'd built a career destroying elderly people. Marianne, you should celebrate. You fought them and you won. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollowed out, because winning meant accepting that my son had really tried to do this to me. There was no more room for doubt, no more space for misunderstanding. Ethan had looked a judge in the eye and lied about me, had painted me as incompetent, dangerous, diminished, had been willing to lock me away to get what he wanted. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Thank you, Richard, I managed, for everything. You did the hard part. I just showed up. He paused. What happens now is up to you. But Marianne, whatever you decide about Ethan, make sure it's what you want, not what you think a good mother should do. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my house, still mine, and tried to figure out what I wanted. I wanted Harold back. I wanted the last 3 years erased. I wanted a son who loved me more than he loved my assets. But wanting impossible things was how I'd ended up here in the first place. Wanting Ethan to be who I'd raised instead of who he'd become. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. I knew who it was before I looked through the peephole. Ethan stood on my porch, alone. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home. The larger part needed to face this. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Mom," his voice cracked. "Can we talk? Please? I don't know what's left to say. I'm sorry." Tears streamed down his face. "I'm so sorry. I screwed up. I know I did. But please, you have to believe I thought I was helping. Stop." I held up a hand. "Don't insult me by pretending this was about help. You tried to have me declared incompetent so you could sell my house and control my money. The judge saw it. I saw it. The only person who still believes your lie is you. That's not—" He stopped, swallowed. Okay, maybe part of it was Sabrina kept saying we needed to plan ahead, that waiting until you were really sick would be harder, and the house is worth so much now, and we have so much debt. So you decided my autonomy was worth less than your financial convenience. I didn't think of it that way. He was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. I thought we could take care of you and solve our problems at the same time. I thought it was a win-win. Except I never agreed to any of it. You didn't ask what I wanted, you just decided. I felt my own tears coming but refused to let them fall. Do you have any idea what these past 2 weeks have been like? Living in fear that my own son would have me locked up? Documenting my own competence like I was on trial for existing? I know, and I hate myself for it. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Mom, please. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. Love isn't supposed to feel like this, I said quietly. Love doesn't come with guardianship petitions and court dates and lies told under oath. I'll make it up to you, however long it takes. Whatever you need. Just don't shut me out completely. His desperation was palpable. You're all I have left. Dad's gone, and if I lose you too, you already lost me, I said. The moment you decided I was a problem to solve instead of a person to respect. That's not fair. Fair? The word came out sharp. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to tell a judge I was dangerous? To claim I forgot Christmas when you have text messages proving otherwise? To bring in a paid expert who never even met me? Ethan flinched with each question. Vance said we needed a strong case. Vance was doing his job. What's your excuse? I gripped the doorframe, needing the support. You're my son, Ethan. You're supposed to protect me, not from myself, but from people who'd hurt me. Instead, you became one of them. I can fix this, he said desperately. Tell me how to fix this. You can't. The truth sat heavy between us. You can apologize, you can feel guilty, you can even mean it, but you can't undo standing in a courtroom and trying to erase me. So that's it? We're done? You're just cutting me out of your life? The question felt like manipulation, designed to make me the villain. Poor Ethan, abandoned by his unreasonable mother. I'm setting a boundary, I said. There's a difference. What does that mean? It means I'm not doing this anymore. The Sunday dinners where you and Sabrina catalog my failures, the phone calls where you question my decisions, the surprise visits to check if I'm managing, it stops. All of it. You're my mother. I have a right to be in your life. No, I interrupted. You have a privilege, one you just abused badly enough to lose. His face went white. You don't mean that. I do. Saying it felt like stepping off a cliff, but also like learning to fly. If you want back in my life eventually, you'll need to earn it. Prove you see me as a person with rights, not an asset to manage. And Ethan? That's going to take a lot more than tears and apologies. How long? His voice was small, childlike. I don't know, maybe months, maybe years, maybe never. I had to be honest, even though it hurt. Right now, I don't trust you. I don't even like you very much. Those things don't heal on your timeline. This is because of Morrison, he said suddenly, anger flashing through the grief. He's poisoned you against me. Richard helped me see clearly. That's different than poisoning. I started to close the door. Go home, Ethan. Work on your marriage, pay your debts, live your life. but leave me out of it until you can treat me like I matter. You do matter. Then act like it. I closed the door before he could respond, locked it, leaned against it while I listened to him cry on the other side. He stayed there for 10 minutes, maybe longer. I heard him talking, probably to Sabrina on the phone, heard his car finally start and pull away. Then I was alone again, but this time the aloneness felt different. Chosen. Mine. I walked through the house, really seeing it for the first time in weeks. The worn carpet Ethan had criticized, the outdated kitchen cabinets, Harold's reading chair, the wall where we'd marked Ethan's height every birthday. This place was imperfect, aging, full of ghosts, just like me, and it was exactly where I belonged. The next few days passed in a strange haze. Carol called every morning to check on me. Richard sent over the final paperwork. Friends from book club started texting, asking if I was okay. Apparently word had spread about the guardianship case. I discovered that surviving a public family implosion came with a strange sort of notoriety. People looked at me differently. Some with pity, some with admiration, most with uncomfortable curiosity. I hated all of it. Tuesday afternoon, a certified letter arrived. From Sabrina. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. The letter was typed on cream stationery, perfectly formatted. Of course it was. Marianne, I hope this letter finds you well. I want to apologize for any hurt our actions may have caused. That was never our intention. May have caused. As if the damage was hypothetical. Ethan has been devastated by the outcome of the hearing and your subsequent rejection of his attempts at reconciliation. While I understand you're angry, I hope you'll consider the impact your choices are having on him. My choices. Not his attempt to destroy me. My refusal to pretend it didn't happen. Family is precious. Life is short. I'd hate to see you waste what time remains on grudges and misunderstandings when you could be building memories with your son. What time remains? A reminder that I was old, running out of time, should be grateful for whatever scraps Ethan threw my way. If you change your mind and decide to rebuild this relationship, we're here. But please don't wait too long. None of us are getting any younger. The letter was signed with Sabrina's elaborate signature, all loops and flourishes. I read it twice, waiting for guilt to kick in, waiting to feel like the unreasonable one, the bitter old woman choosing pride over family. The guilt never came. Instead, I felt something sharper, clarity. Sabrina wasn't apologizing. She was negotiating, trying to reframe the narrative so that I became the problem. The stubborn mother too proud to forgive, destroying her relationship with her devoted son over a simple misunderstanding. It was gaslighting dressed up in concern. Again. I took the letter to the kitchen and fed it to the garbage disposal, watched the expensive stationery shred into pulp. It felt better than it should have. Then I sat down and wrote my own letter, not to Sabrina, to myself. I, Marianne Holloway, being of sound mind and body, do hereby acknowledge that I deserve to be treated with respect, that my boundaries matter, that saying no to people who hurt me, even family, is not cruelty. It's self-preservation. I will not apologize for surviving. I will not shrink myself to make others comfortable. I will not set myself on fire to keep anyone warm. I am 68 years old. I am a widow, a mother, an architect, a human being worthy of dignity, and I am done letting anyone tell me otherwise. I signed it, dated it, and tucked it into the folder with the guardianship ruling, evidence that I'd finally learned to fight for myself. The following Sunday, I went to brunch with Carol and 2 other women from book club. They'd invited me weeks ago, but I'd been too anxious about the hearing to commit. Now, sitting in a sunny bistro eating overpriced eggs Benedict, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Lightness. You look different, Carol observed. Lighter, like you're taking up space again. Is that good? It's necessary, she said firmly. You'd started disappearing, even before all this with Ethan. After Harold died, you just faded. Had I? I thought back to the woman I'd been 3 years ago. Before grief, before doubt. Before I'd started questioning every decision, every thought, every memory. I didn't realize, I admitted. Grief does that, Carol said. Makes you forget you're allowed to still want things, still be things. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. I'm glad you're remembering. Was I though, or was I just reacting, bouncing between extremes, doormat to dictator, compliant to confrontational. What if I'm overcorrecting? I asked quietly. What if cutting Ethan off makes me as bad as him? Setting a boundary doesn't make you bad, Carol said. It makes you smart. And Marianne, you're not cutting him off forever. You're stepping back until he can meet you as an equal. That's healthy. It doesn't feel healthy. It feels awful. Most worthwhile things do at first. She sat back, studied me. Can I ask you something? If Harold were here, what would he say? The question hit harder than expected. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure Harold's voice, his advice. He'd tell me to hold my ground, I said finally. Harold hated bullies, and he'd be furious that Ethan tried this. Then trust that, Carol said. Trust yourself. You've earned it. I wanted to. But 68 years of putting others first was a hard habit to break. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source 2 weeks later. A call from Ethan's aunt, Harold's sister, Linda, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Marianne, I heard what happened. Linda's voice was tight with anger. I can't believe that boy, after everything you've done for him. It's complicated, I started, but Linda cut me off. It's not complicated. It's greed, pure and simple. She sighed. I need to tell you something. Something Harold made me promise not to mention unless it became necessary. I think we're there. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? When Harold updated his will after his father's estate disaster, he didn't just leave everything to you. He set up a secondary trust, $500,000, earmarked for Ethan's inheritance, but only accessible after you passed or if you chose to release it early. I'd known about the trust in abstract terms, but Harold had handled those details. Okay, Ethan knows about it, Linda said. Harold told him years ago, said it was meant to give him security, but only after you were taken care of first. She paused. Marianne, that money doesn't exist anymore. What? Harold had to liquidate the trust 6 months before he died. Medical bills from his father's final illness, plus some bad investments. It was gone. Harold was planning to rebuild it, but then he died so suddenly, Linda's voice broke. Ethan doesn't know. Harold never got the chance to tell him, so Ethan's been counting on money that isn't there. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He thinks when I die, he inherits $500,000. Yes, and if you sold the house, moved to Meadowbrook, put everything in a trust he controlled, he could probably access it sooner. Linda sounded disgusted. I don't think he consciously planned it that way, but the motivation was there, the expectation. I felt like I'd been punched. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I hoped I'd never have to. I hoped Ethan was better than this. I was wrong. She sighed. Harold loved that boy so much. He'd be heartbroken. After we hung up, I sat with this new information, trying to sort through the implications. Ethan had been counting on inheritance money that didn't exist. Money he thought I was sitting on, hoarding, keeping from him. No wonder Sabrina had been so insistent about managing my finances. She was looking for the trust Harold had mentioned years ago. They'd probably spent it already in their minds, planned around it, maybe even borrowed against it. And when I'd refused to cooperate, when I'd asserted control over my own assets, they'd panicked, decided to force the issue through guardianship. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it explained it. The truly sick part? If Ethan had just asked me for help, I might have given it. If he'd said, Mom, we're drowning in debt, is there any way you could help? I'd have found something, sold some bonds, refinanced something, figured it out. But he'd never asked. He'd just decided I owed him. Decided my money was his birthright. Decided my autonomy was an obstacle. That night I wrote another letter, this one to Ethan. I know about the trust. I know it's gone. I know you've been expecting money that doesn't exist. If you'd asked, we could have talked about it. Found solutions together. But you didn't ask. You tried to take. That's the difference between a son and a thief. You need to figure out which one you want to be. Mom. I didn't mail it. Didn't even print it. Just wrote it to get the poison out. Because the truth was, knowing about the money didn't change anything. Ethan had still tried to destroy me. Understanding his motivation didn't erase his actions. May turned into June. Harold's roses bloomed right on schedule, pink and white and yellow. I tended them carefully, pruning dead heads, feeding the roots. Physical work that gave me time to think. I started saying yes to things again. Book club, always. A historical society lecture on Victorian architecture. Coffee with old colleagues from the university. Small social things that reminded me I existed outside of being Ethan's mother. I also started saying no. To guilt trips. To manipulative phone calls. To the voice in my head that said good mothers always forgive, always accommodate, always put their children first. That voice sounded a lot like my own mother, I realized. The woman who'd stayed with my father through his affairs, his drinking, his cruelty, because family is forever, and you made your bed. I'd absorbed those lessons without questioning them. Sacrifice equals love, endurance equals virtue, suffering in silence equals strength. What a load of garbage. Real strength was knowing when to walk away. Real love required mutual respect. Real family didn't weaponize guilt and obligation. The call I'd been half expecting came on a Saturday in late June, not from Ethan, but from Sabrina. "Marianne, we need to talk." No preamble, no pleasantries. "This has gone on long enough." "I agree. You and Ethan should move on with your lives." "That's not what I meant." Her voice had an edge that suggested her patience, if she'd ever had any, was gone. "You're being unreasonable, petty, cruel, frankly. Ethan made a mistake, but he's apologized. What more do you want? I want him to actually change, not just feel bad about getting caught. He's your son. You don't get to just discard him because he hurt your feelings." "He tried to have me declared incompetent," I said slowly, like explaining to a child. "That's not hurt feelings. That's attempted legal erasure." "Oh, please, you're being so dramatic." Sabrina's tone dripped condescension. "It was a guardianship petition, not a murder plot. We were trying to help you age gracefully. By taking everything I own? By relieving you of burdens you shouldn't have to carry." Her voice rose. "You're 68 years old, living alone in a house too big for you, pretending you're still 30. It's sad, Marianne. Pathetic, even." There it was, the truth beneath the concern. She thought I was pathetic. "I'm done with this conversation," I said. "No, you're not. Because I'm not finished." Sabrina's voice went cold. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forgive Ethan, publicly, preferably, so people stop looking at us like we're monsters. You're going to resume family dinners and normal contact, and you're going to stop poisoning him against me." "I haven't said a word against you to Ethan." "Your silence is loud enough," she snapped. "He feels guilty, which makes him resentful of me. You're destroying my marriage." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "Your marriage problems aren't my responsibility." "Everything is your responsibility," Sabrina shouted. "You're the mother. You're supposed to make this okay. That's your job, to sacrifice, to forgive, to hold the family together no matter what." And there it was. The underlying assumption. My purpose was to absorb damage, to smooth over conflict, to sacrifice myself on the altar of family harmony. "No," I said simply. "Excuse me?" "No, that's not my job anymore. Maybe it never should have been." I felt something settle in my chest. Certainty. "Sabrina, I don't forgive you. I don't forgive Ethan, and I'm not interested in pretending otherwise for your comfort." "You selfish bitch!" I hung up. Blocked her number. Then I blocked Ethan's too, because I knew he'd call next with some version of the same demand. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From the sheer wild freedom of refusing to be someone's emotional punching bag anymore. Carol called an hour later. Apparently Sabrina had called her, furious, demanding Carol talk sense into me. "I told her you seem perfectly sensible to me," Carol reported cheerfully. "She called me a vulture and hung up." "I'm sorry she dragged you into this." "Are you kidding? I've been waiting years to tell that woman off." Carol laughed. "How are you doing? Really?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel free and terrified at the same time." "That sounds about right. You're rebuilding yourself. It's supposed to feel weird." Was that what this was? Rebuilding? It felt more like controlled demolition, tearing down everything I'd been to make space for something new. That night I did something I hadn't done since Harold died. I went into his study, pulled out the architectural drawings from my career, and really looked at them. There was the community center I designed in 1987, the affordable housing project that won awards, the school addition that created flexible learning spaces. Work I'd been proud of. Work that mattered. When had I stopped thinking of myself as someone who built things? I spent the next week sketching. Nothing serious, just concepts. A tiny house design for aging adults who wanted independence without maintenance. A multi-generational housing model that gave privacy while keeping family close. Ideas that had been percolating in the back of my mind, waiting for me to have the energy and confidence to explore them. Richard called with news that the state bar investigation into Philip Vance was proceeding. They're taking it seriously. Multiple complaints from other families. Yours might be the case that finally brings him down. Good. Let him lose his license. Let him face consequences for the damage he'd done. But consequences weren't the same as repair. The families he'd torn apart would stay broken. The elderly people he'd helped disenfranchise would carry those scars forever. Justice was important. But it didn't undo trauma. In early July, I got a handwritten letter. Not from Ethan, but from his friend Marcus, someone I'd known since he and Ethan were in high school together. Mrs. H, I hope you don't mind me writing. Ethan doesn't know I'm doing this, but I needed to tell you. He's not okay. He's drinking too much, barely sleeping. Sabrina moved out last week. I think you should know. I read the letter 3 times, waiting for the guilt to crush me. It didn't come. Instead, I felt sad. Sad that my son was hurting. Sad that his marriage was falling apart. Sad that this was where we'd ended up. But I didn't feel responsible for fixing it. Ethan was an adult. He'd made adult choices. Now he was facing adult consequences. That wasn't my fault, and it wasn't my job to rescue him from himself. I wrote Marcus back. Thank you for telling me. I hope Ethan finds the help he needs. But that help isn't me. Not anymore. Sending that letter felt like the final door closing, the last thread cut. I was free, and I was alone. Both things were true. Both things were okay. Summer deepened. I worked in the garden, sketched designs, reconnected with old friends. Slowly, carefully, I built a life that didn't revolve around being someone's mother. It felt strange, selfish sometimes, but also necessary. I was learning what I should have known all along, that loving someone didn't require destroying yourself. That being a good mother didn't mean being an infinite well of forgiveness, that I was allowed to choose me. The envelope arrived in mid-August, forwarded from Richard's office. Legal letterhead. I almost didn't open it, expecting some new attack. Instead, it was a settlement offer from Ethan and Sabrina's divorce attorney. They were dividing assets. Sabrina wanted documentation that Ethan had no claim to my estate, no expectation of inheritance beyond whatever I chose to leave him. The attorney's note was clinical. Mrs. Holloway, for purposes of equitable distribution in the divorce proceedings, we need confirmation regarding your son's financial relationship to your estate. I wrote back with brutal honesty. Ethan Holloway has no claim to my estate. He will inherit whatever I choose to leave him in my will, which at this time is substantially less than it would have been before he tried to have me declared incompetent. Please advise your client accordingly. Let Sabrina know exactly what their scheme had cost. Let her choke on it. The response came within days. Sabrina had filed for full divorce, citing Ethan's financial misrepresentation as grounds. She was taking her half of everything and walking away. Ethan was losing his wife, his money, and his mother all at once. Part of me, a small maternal part, hurt for him. The rest of me thought maybe pain was the only teacher he'd listened to. September arrived with cooler air and golden light. I was in the garden, deadheading the last of the summer roses, when Carol appeared on the path. "You have a visitor," she said carefully. "I offered to send him away, but he says it's important." I knew without asking. "Where is he?" "Front porch." Ethan looked terrible. Thinner, grayer, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. He stood when he saw me, his hands twisting together nervously. "Mom, thank you for seeing me." "I haven't decided if I'm seeing you yet," I said. "Talk fast." He flinched. "I deserve that. I deserve worse." He took a shaky breath. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't have the right. I need to say some things. And I need you to hear them." I crossed my arms, waiting. "You were right about everything," he said. "The guardianship was about money, about control. I convinced myself it was concern, but it was greed dressed up in worry." His voice cracked. "I became exactly what Dad would have hated." "Yes, you did." Sabrina's gone. The divorce is almost final. She's taking half of everything, which isn't much because we're drowning in debt. He laughed bitterly. The money I thought I'd inherit from Dad? Linda told me. It's gone, has been for years. We built our whole financial plan on inheritance that didn't exist. I know. You know. Linda called me months ago. He looked stunned. And you didn't offer to help? Would you have? I asked quietly. If the situation were reversed? If I'd tried to have you declared incompetent so I could control your money? Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. No, he admitted finally. I'd have cut you off completely. Then you understand why I did. I do. He sat down heavily on the porch steps. I've been going to therapy, court-ordered at first, from the divorce. But I kept going because I needed to understand how I became this person. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. The therapist says I have abandonment issues, from losing Dad, that I was trying to lock you down so I couldn't lose you too. By destroying me first, the words came out harsher than I intended. That's not love, Ethan. That's possession. I know that now. He wiped his eyes roughly. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to let me back in your life. I just needed you to know that I see what I did. I understand how wrong it was. And I'm sorry. Truly, desperately sorry. The apology was everything I'd wanted months ago. But now, hearing it, I realized it wasn't enough. Sorry didn't undo the fear. Didn't erase the courtroom or the lies or the moment I'd had to fight my own son for the right to exist. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. But Ethan, I don't trust you. I don't know if I ever will again. I understand. Do you? I sat down beside him, keeping distance between us. Because here's what I learned through all of this. I don't need you to be happy. I don't need you to feel complete. For years, I organized my life around being your mother, and that made me small, dependent, vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation you and Sabrina pulled. Mom, let me finish. I took a breath. I'm rebuilding myself. Not as your mother, but as Mary Ann, a whole person who exists with or without you, and that person doesn't have room for people who hurt her, even if they're sorry afterward. So that's it? His voice was small. We're done? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday, if you prove you've really changed, we can find some version of a relationship. But it won't be what we had. That's gone. You killed it. He nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. I did. I know. We sat in silence for a while. I studied him, trying to find traces of the boy I'd raised in this broken man beside me. He was in there somewhere, but he was buried under so much damage, so much selfishness, so many bad choices. What happens now? He asked finally. You go live your life. I live mine. Maybe our paths cross again someday. Maybe they don't. I stood. But Ethan, whatever happens, it has to be on my terms, not yours. Not anymore. I understand. He stood too, hesitated, then held out his hand. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I shook it. Brief, formal, the way you'd greet an acquaintance. Not a hug. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But a beginning, or an ending. Time would tell. He walked to his car, not the Mercedes anymore, something smaller and older, and drove away. Carol emerged from wherever she'd been hovering. You okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to find it true. Yeah, I think I am. What now? I looked at the house behind me, my house, my home, my choice. Now? I smiled. Now I live. Living turned out to be harder than I'd expected. Not the practical parts. Those I managed fine. Bills paid on time, house maintained, garden thriving. All the things Ethan had claimed I couldn't do, I was doing. That should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt empty. Because winning the right to live alone didn't magically make loneliness disappear. Standing up for myself didn't erase 45 years of defining myself through other people. And setting boundaries with my son didn't fill the hole where my son used to be. The first few weeks after Ethan's visit, I kept catching myself reaching for the phone to call him. Some small victory I wanted to share, some question about a memory only he would know. Then I'd remember. Remember the courtroom. Remember the lies. Remember that the person I wanted to call didn't exist anymore, if he ever had. Carol noticed me withdrawing again. She showed up one Tuesday with takeout and wouldn't leave until I'd eaten. "You're doing that thing again," she said, stabbing at her Callℹ chicken. "Getting quiet, fading. I'm just tired." "You're grieving," she corrected, "and that's allowed. But Marianne, you can't grieve yourself back into invisibility. That's what they wanted." "I know." I pushed rice around my plate. "But Carol, what if they were a little bit right? What if I'm not meant to be alone? What if I need someone?" Need and want are different things. You don't need Ethan. You might want a relationship with him eventually, but you'll survive without it. She leaned forward. "The question is, what do you want for yourself? Not as a mother, not as a widow, just as Marianne." I had no idea. For so long, my wants had been tied to other people's needs. Harold needed a partner, so I wanted to be a good wife. Ethan needed a mother, so I wanted to be supportive. The house needed maintenance, so I wanted to keep it running. But what did I want just for me? "I don't know," I admitted. "Then figure it out," Carol said. "You've got time now. Use it." So I tried. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center, something I'd always been curious about but never prioritized. I joined a walking group that met twice a week. I started volunteering at the Historical Society, giving tours of old buildings and talking about architecture. Small things. But they added up to something that almost felt like purpose. The watercolor teacher was a woman in her 50s named Diana, who had opinions about everything and no filter whatsoever. She took one look at my first painting, a stiff, overworked rendering of a vase, and said, "You're thinking too much. Stop controlling it and let the water do some of the work." "I don't know how to not control it," I said. "Yeah, I'm getting that vibe." She grinned. "Loosen your grip, Marianne. The point isn't perfection. It's expression. Expression." When was the last time I'd expressed anything that wasn't carefully measured and appropriate? I tried again, this time letting the paint bleed and blur, trusting the process instead of micromanaging every brushstroke. The result was messier, imperfect, but there was something alive in it that my first attempt had lacked. "There," Diana said, looking over my shoulder. "That's honest, more of that." Honest, what a concept. October arrived with cool mornings and the smell of wood smoke. I was raking leaves when a car I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. My first instinct was fear. Had Ethan sent someone? Was this another attack? But the woman who got out was in her 30s, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase. She smiled as she approached. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Jennifer Chen from the State Elder Advocacy Office. Do you have a few minutes?" My guard went up immediately. "What's this about?" "Your guardianship case. May I come in?" I considered saying no, but curiosity won. I led her to the living room, offered coffee, she declined, and waited. Jennifer pulled out a folder. "Your case caught our attention because of Judge Reynolds' ruling and her referral regarding attorney misconduct. We've been investigating Philip Vance and found a pattern. Dozens of guardianship cases where vulnerable adults were essentially robbed by family members with Vance's help." "I wasn't vulnerable," I said sharply. "I know. That's actually why I'm here." She opened the folder, showing me documents. Most of Vance's victims didn't have the resources to fight back. They didn't have Richard Morrison. They didn't have your clarity or strength. And now they're trapped in facilities, stripped of autonomy, while their assets are drained by court-appointed guardians. The words made my stomach turn. That's horrifying. It is. And it's legal if you know how to work the system. Jennifer leaned forward. "We're building a case to reform guardianship laws in this state, but we need people willing to speak publicly about what happened to them. Would you consider testifying before the state legislature?" "Me?" The idea was absurd. "I'm nobody." "You're exactly somebody," Jennifer interrupted. "You're educated, articulate, sympathetic. You won your case, which means you can speak from a position of strength rather than victimhood. Your testimony could change laws, Mrs. Holloway. Help protect people who can't protect themselves." I thought about all those other families, other mothers, fathers, grandparents who'd been disappeared into the guardianship system, their lives stolen with a judge's signature. It could have been me, if I hadn't had Richard, if I hadn't fought back, if I'd been just a little bit less stubborn or a little bit more afraid. What would I have to do? I asked. Jennifer's smile widened. Tell your story, the whole truth. Make them see what nearly happened to you and what is happening to people every single day. The hearing was scheduled for late November. Jennifer warned me it would be intense. Not just my testimony, but questions from legislators, possible media coverage, pushback from attorneys who profited from the current system. You'll be challenged, she said. People will suggest you're exaggerating or that your case was unique. Can you handle that? I thought about sitting across from Ethan in the courtroom, about Sabrina's condescension, about Dr. Ashford's clinical dismissal of my competence. I can handle it, I said. Preparing my testimony meant reliving everything. Jennifer had me write out a timeline. Every conversation, every threat, every lie told under oath. Seeing it all laid out in black and white made it somehow worse. The calculated nature of it, the premeditation. This hadn't been a panicked reaction or a misunderstanding. It had been a campaign, carefully planned, methodically executed, designed to strip me of everything while making it look like kindness. Richard helped me shape the narrative for maximum impact. Don't minimize their actions, he coached. Don't make excuses for Ethan. Tell the truth plainly and let the legislators draw their own conclusions. It feels like I'm betraying him all over again, I admitted. You're not betraying him. You're holding him accountable. Richard's expression was stern. And more importantly, you're protecting other people from experiencing what you did. That matters more than protecting Ethan's reputation. He was right. I knew he was right. But old habits died hard. The instinct to shield my child, even when my child had tried to destroy me. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining Ethan seeing news coverage, learning I'd testified against guardianship abuse. Would he recognize himself in my story, feel ashamed, or would he find a way to make himself the victim again? At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs, made tea, sat in Harold's chair. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I said to the empty room, to Harold's ghost, to whatever part of myself still doubted. The house creaked and settled around me. No answers, no signs, just silence and my own racing thoughts. But somewhere in that silence, I found clarity. This wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was about the 70-year-old woman who'd lost her house to a guardian she'd never met. The 85-year-old man whose children had emptied his accounts while he sat in a nursing home, confused and alone. Their stories mattered more than my discomfort. Their protection mattered more than Ethan's feelings. I had a platform, a voice. I could use it, or I could stay silent to keep the peace. But I was done keeping peace at the expense of truth. The legislative hearing room was nothing like the courthouse. Larger, more formal, with rows of seats filling rapidly as I arrived. Jennifer met me at the entrance. Big turnout, she said. Your case got attention. Are you ready? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The hearing opened with technical testimony about guardianship statistics, exploitation patterns, financial abuse, dry, clinical language that somehow made the horror more palatable, numbers instead of names, percentages instead of people. Then Jennifer called me to testify. I walked to the microphone on shaking legs, aware of every eye in the room. The panel of legislators sat elevated, looking down at me. Some bored, some attentive, all waiting. I started with the script Jennifer and I had prepared. My background, my credentials, my competence, establishing that I wasn't someone who needed guardianship. Then I described the lunch, Ethan's words, Sabrina's pressure, the slow realization that I was being hunted. My son told me, "Mom, we're only trying to be kind to you. Don't think you don't matter," I said, my voice steady. But what he meant was, you don't get to matter anymore. We're making the decisions now. I walked them through the petition, the hearing, the lies told under oath. I didn't soften it, didn't make excuses. My son hired a neuropsychologist who never met me to testify I was incompetent. His wife lied about incidents that never happened. Their attorney built a case on manufactured evidence because the truth, that I was a functioning adult who refused to surrender my autonomy, didn't serve their purpose. One legislator, a woman in her 60s, leaned forward. "Mrs. Holloway, why do you think they did this? What was the motivation?" "Money," I said bluntly. "My house is worth over $1 million. They thought I had a trust fund I don't actually have. They were drowning in debt and saw me as a solution. Guardianship was the legal mechanism to access my assets without my consent. But they could have just asked you for help, another legislator said. They could have, but asking meant I could say no. Guardianship meant they'd have control whether I agreed or not. I paused. That's the flaw in the system. It assumes guardians act in good faith. Mine didn't, and there was almost nothing I could do to stop them. But you won your case, someone pointed out. Because I had resources, I said. I had a good lawyer willing to work pro bono. I had friends who supported me. I had enough competence to document my own capacity. Most people in my situation don't have those advantages. They get swallowed by the system and disappear. I told them about the other cases Jennifer had described. The woman whose daughter-in-law moved her to another state and isolated her completely. The man whose court-appointed guardian sold his house and pocketed the proceeds. The countless elderly people trapped in facilities, medicated into compliance, robbed blind while the system looked the other way. This isn't rare, I said. It's routine. Guardianship has become a legal tool for elder abuse, and the people who should be protected are instead being victimized by their own children, by professional guardians, by lawyers who profit from every case they file. My voice broke on that last part, but I pushed through. I almost lost everything. My home, my autonomy, my dignity. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I fought back and won. But I shouldn't have had to fight at all. No competent adult should have to prove they deserve basic human rights. The room was silent when I finished. Then the questions started. Some were sympathetic, asking how I'd survived emotionally, what reforms I'd recommend. Others were skeptical, suggesting my case was extreme, that most guardianships were necessary and helpful. One legislator, a man in his 40s with the smug expression of someone who'd never been vulnerable a day in his life, basically accused me of being vindictive. Mrs. Holloway, isn't it possible your son genuinely believed you needed help? That you're characterizing normal family concern as abuse? I looked at him directly. If your family tried to have you declared incompetent so they could sell your house and control your money, would you call that normal concern? That's different. How? I interrupted. Because you're young, male, employed? Those are the only differences between us. I'm competent, independent, and managing my life successfully. But because I'm 68 and female and widowed, people assume I need supervision. That assumption is what makes this abuse possible. He had no response to that. After 2 hours, Jennifer finally ended my testimony. I stepped down feeling wrung out, but strangely lighter. I told the truth. All of it. No softening, no excuses, no protection for people who didn't deserve it. And it had mattered. I could see it in the faces of the legislators, the people in the audience. Some were crying, others looked angry, but they were listening. Outside the hearing room, reporters surrounded me. I'd been prepared for this, but the reality was still overwhelming. Cameras, microphones, questions shouted from multiple directions. Mrs. Holloway, what would you say to your son if he's watching? The question caught me off guard. What would I say to Ethan? I'd tell him that love isn't control, I said finally, that protecting someone doesn't mean erasing them, and that I hope he learns the difference before he tries this with someone else. Do you think you'll ever reconcile? I don't know. That's up to him. I took a breath. Reconciliation requires accountability. Not just apologies, but genuine change. Until he can demonstrate that, there's nothing to reconcile to. The story ran on the local news that night, then picked up by state media. By morning, it had gone national. Elderly architect fights off son's guardianship attempt, trending on social media. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, advocacy groups, people sharing their own guardianship horror stories. I had to turn it off just to breathe. Carol came over with wine and commiseration. You're famous. I'm notorious, I corrected. There's a difference. Does it feel okay, going public like that? I considered the question. It feels necessary, scary, but necessary. Any word from Ethan? I shook my head. I'd unblocked his number that morning, wondering if he'd reach out. So far, nothing. Part of me hoped he would. Part of me hoped he wouldn't. I was a mess of contradictions. The response came 3 days later. Not a call, but a letter. I recognized Ethan's handwriting on the envelope. My hand shook as I opened it. Mom, I saw your testimony. I watched you on TV telling the world what I did. And I need you to know you're right about all of it. I was trying to control you. I did lie. I did prioritize money over your autonomy, and I'm ashamed. I kept reading, bracing for the but that usually followed admissions like this. It never came. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or to defend myself. I'm writing because you deserve to know that your testimony woke me up in a way therapy hasn't. Seeing the pain in your face, hearing you describe what I put you through, it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I destroyed us. I know that, and I'm going to have to live with it for the rest of my life. Thank you for using that pain to help other people. You're braver than I ever gave you credit for, stronger than I wanted to believe. And I'm sorry it took losing you to see it. I love you. I'll always love you. But I understand why love isn't enough anymore. Ethan. I read the letter 4 times, searching for manipulation, for hidden demands, for any sign this was another performance. But it read like truth. Raw, painful, honest truth. It didn't change anything, didn't erase the damage, didn't make me ready to let him back into my life. But it was something, a crack in the wall, not wide enough to walk through yet, but present. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the folder with all the other documentation, evidence of harm, evidence of accountability, all of it preserved. The Legislative Committee voted 2 weeks later to recommend sweeping guardianship reforms. Stricter oversight, mandatory independent evaluations, penalties for attorneys who filed frivolous petitions. It wasn't everything, but it was progress. Jennifer called to tell me the news. "You did this," she said. "Your testimony was the tipping point. It wasn't just me." "Don't do that," she interrupted. "Don't minimize. You stood up when it mattered, and it made a difference. Own that. Own it." Such a small phrase, but it hit hard. I'd spent my whole life deflecting credit, attributing success to luck or other people or anything except my own capability. Harold always joked that I could win a Nobel Prize and thanked the committee for their mistake. Maybe it was time to stop apologizing for taking up space. I started saying yes to things I would have declined before. A speaking engagement at a law school about elder rights, an interview for an advocacy newsletter, a consultation with a nonprofit redesigning their community center, my first paid architectural work in 5 years. Small steps back into the world as myself, not as someone's mother or someone's widow. It felt good, strange and uncomfortable sometimes, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit yet. But good. December came cold and clear. I decorated the house for Christmas, something I'd skipped the past 2 years, unable to face the memories. This year felt different. The memories didn't hurt quite as much. Harold was still gone, but he wasn't the only thing that defined this house anymore. I hung lights in the windows, put up the tree Harold and I had bought in 1995, arranged the ornaments Ethan had made as a child. Each one told a story. Some happy, some painful, all mine. Christmas morning, I woke up alone, but not lonely. Carol had invited me to spend the day with her family, and I'd accepted. Not because I needed rescuing, but because I wanted the company. The difference mattered. I was making coffee when the doorbell rang. 8 a.m. on Christmas morning. Who the hell? Ethan stood on my porch, holding a small wrapped box. He looked nervous, uncertain, nothing like the confident lawyer who'd tried to destroy me 6 months ago. "I know I shouldn't be here," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to ambush you or force anything. I wanted to give you this. And then I'll go." I stared at him, my brain still catching up. "How did you know I'd be home?" "I didn't. I was going to leave it on the porch if you weren't." He held out the box. "Please, just take it." I accepted the gift, our fingers brushing briefly. He pulled back like I'd burned him. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked back to his car. I stood on the porch in my bathrobe, holding the box, watching him drive away. He didn't look back. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table and carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside was a small wooden box, handmade, with intricate carving on the lid. A rose. Harold's roses. And inside the box, a letter. "Mom, I made this in the woodworking class I've been taking. Therapy homework, do something with my hands that isn't destructive. I thought of you with every cut, every sanding, every detail. Thought about all the things you built that I tried to tear down. This isn't much. It can't fix anything, but it's honest work, made with honest intention. And maybe that's a start. I'm not asking to be back in your life. I'm just showing you that I'm trying to become someone worth letting back in. Someday. If you ever want to. I love you. Merry Christmas. Ethan. The box was beautiful. Imperfect. I could see where the joints didn't quite match, where the sanding had been uneven. But it was made with care, with thought, with love that looked like effort instead of control. I ran my fingers over the carved rose, thinking about Harold's garden, about the roses that bloomed every June, proof that life continued even after loss. Maybe relationships were like that too. They could die and leave nothing but ghosts. Or they could die back to the roots and eventually, with time and care and the right conditions, grow into something new, different from what they'd been. Smaller, maybe. Less certain, but alive. I placed the box on the mantel next to Harold's photo. Not hidden away, not forgotten. Just there, alongside everything else that made up my life. Then I finished my coffee, got dressed, and drove to Carol's house for Christmas dinner. The roses would bloom again in June, and when they did, I'd decide then whether to tell Ethan about them. Or maybe I wouldn't decide at all. Maybe I'd just let time do what time does, soften some edges, sharpen others, transform pain into something bearable. I was learning to live with uncertainty, with the understanding that some questions didn't have answers, some relationships didn't have resolution, and some wounds just became scars you carried. And that was okay, because I was still here, still standing, still fighting for my right to exist on my own terms. That was enough. For now, it was enough. Spring came slowly that year, fighting its way through a stubborn winter that didn't want to let go. I watched from the kitchen window as green shoots pushed through frozen ground, life insisting on itself despite resistance. There was a lesson in that, I thought. Sometimes survival looks like pushing through when everything around you says stop. 4 months had passed since Christmas, since Ethan's wooden box sat on my mantel like a question I couldn't answer, since I'd started wondering if holding on to anger was protection or just another kind of prison. The letters kept coming. One every few weeks, never demanding, never pushing, just updates, therapy progress, volunteer hours at the advocacy office, small victories in his own reconstruction. I still hadn't responded to any of them. Couldn't figure out what to say that wasn't either too soft or too cutting. So I filed them away and pretended I hadn't noticed the pattern, that each one was better written than the last, more honest, less performative. Richard called in late March with news that complicated everything. Philip Vance lost his license, he said without preamble. Permanently disbarred. The state bar found evidence of systematic fraud. 43 cases, Marianne, 43 families he helped destroy. Good, I said, but the word felt hollow. Justice for Vance didn't undo the damage to those 43 families, didn't give them back the years they'd lost. There's more. Several victims are filing a class action civil suit. They want you to join as a named plaintiff. Your case has visibility. It could strengthen the whole claim. My stomach turned. More courtrooms, more lawyers, more reliving the worst months of my life? Potentially, yes, but also potential compensation. 6 figures, possibly more. And Marianne? Richard's voice softened. It would make a statement that what happened to you was criminal, not just unfortunate, that Vance and people like him belong in prison, not just out of practice. I thought about all those other families, wondered how many had children like Ethan, how many had been disappeared into facilities, their assets stripped, their voices silenced. Let me think about it, I said, but thinking about it meant thinking about everything else. The hearing, the fear. The moment I'd realized my own son saw me as an obstacle worth destroying. I ended up in Harold's study at 2 a.m., surrounded by the architectural drawings from my career, buildings I'd designed that still stood, spaces I'd created that people still used, evidence that I'd mattered once, built things that lasted. When had I stopped believing I was someone who built things? The question sat heavy in the dark, because the truth was, Ethan hadn't made me small. I'd been shrinking for years before he noticed. Grief had started it. Widowhood had accelerated it. And by the time Ethan struck, I'd already half disappeared myself. That was the part that hurt most. Not that he'd tried to erase me, but that I'd made it so easy. The next morning, I called Jennifer Chen at the Elder Advocacy Office. I want to join the lawsuit, I said, and I want to do more advocacy work, not just consulting, active cases. I want to help people fight. Are you sure? Jennifer sounded surprised. It's emotionally brutal, Marianne. Every case will trigger your own trauma. I know. But sitting at home protecting my feelings doesn't help anybody. I took a breath. I survived this for a reason. I need to believe that reason is bigger than just me. There was a pause. Then Jennifer said quietly, "We have a case right now. Woman named Patricia, 72, husband just died. Her stepson filed for guardianship 3 weeks after the funeral. Says she's incompetent because she cried too much at the wake." Rage, clean and clarifying, swept through me. That's grief, not incompetence. I know, but the stepson's lawyer is making it sound like mental breakdown. The hearing's in 6 weeks. She can't afford an attorney. Connect me, I said. Today. I met Patricia the next afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. She was smaller than I expected, worn down in a way I recognized. The look of someone who'd been told so many times they were failing that they'd started to believe it. "I don't understand why you'd help me," she said after I'd explained who I was. "You don't know me. I know what you're going through. That's enough." "But your son, he stopped, didn't he? When you fought back." Her voice dropped. "My stepson won't stop. He's already moved into my house, says he's taking care of things. Changed the locks last week. I had to stay with my sister." The familiar rage flared. "That's illegal. You can't be locked out of your own home." "Can't I?" Patricia's laugh was bitter. "He showed the police some papers saying he had power of attorney. They believed him. Told me to sort it out with a lawyer." She looked at her hands. "I don't have money for a lawyer. Don't have money for anything anymore. He closed my bank accounts 2 days ago." This was exactly what would have happened to me if I'd been poorer, less educated, less able to fight back. The system didn't protect vulnerable people. It fed them to predators. "Do you have the power of attorney document he showed the police?" I asked. "No, he wouldn't let me see it. Because it's probably forged." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling someone. We're going to fix this." Over the next 2 weeks, I learned exactly how broken the system was. How easy it was for bad actors to weaponize guardianship proceedings. How courts assumed family members acted in good faith even when the evidence screamed otherwise. Patricia's stepson, a middle-aged, unemployed gambling addict named Dennis, had forged his late father's signature on a power of attorney document. Had been systematically draining Patricia's account since the funeral. Had already listed her house with a realtor without her consent. And when we tried to stop him, his lawyer argued that Patricia was too emotionally unstable to make rational decisions about her life. Sound familiar? The parallels to my own case were nauseating. Different details, same playbook. Make the victim seem incompetent. Manufacture urgency. Isolate them from support. Strike while they're vulnerable. I threw myself into Patricia's case with an intensity that worried Carol. "You're going to burn out," she warned over coffee one morning. "This isn't sustainable." "Neither is sitting around feeling sorry for myself," I shot back. "At least this matters." "Your healing matters too. I'll heal when fewer people are getting robbed by their own families." Carol studied me. "This isn't just about Patricia, is it? This is about proving Ethan didn't break you." The observation hit harder than I wanted to admit. "Maybe. Is that so wrong?" "No, just make sure you're not running from your own life by trying to save everyone else's." But saving Patricia felt easier than figuring out my own mess. Clear bad guy, clear objective. Not like the complicated grief of maybe, possibly, eventually letting Ethan earn his way back. Patricia's hearing was brutal. Dennis's lawyer painted her as a hysterical widow who couldn't manage basic tasks. Brought in a neighbor who testified that Patricia had seemed confused when asked about her late husband's affairs. Of course, she'd seemed confused. Her husband had just died. Grief wasn't a diagnosis. But the lawyer twisted every normal response to loss into evidence of incompetence. She cried at the funeral, unstable. She didn't immediately understand complex financial documents, declining cognition. She'd lost weight, self-neglect. I sat in the gallery watching the same horror show I'd survived, except this time I couldn't do anything but bear witness. Then something unexpected happened. The judge, a different one from my case, older, male, someone I'd assumed would side with the stepson, stopped the proceedings. "Counselor," he said to Dennis's lawyer, "I've read the case file. I've reviewed the medical evaluations, and I'm struggling to find any evidence of actual incompetence rather than normal grief responses. Can you point me to specific documented incidents of decision-making impairment? The lawyer sputtered about the confusion, the crying, the weight loss, none of which constitute legal grounds for guardianship, the judge said flatly. Mrs. Patterson just lost her husband of 47 years. If she weren't upset, that would concern me. Grief is not a mental illness. I watched Dennis's face go from confident to panicked. The judge continued, Furthermore, I have concerns about the power of attorney document Mr. Patterson submitted to law enforcement. The signature appears inconsistent with other documents signed by the deceased. I'm ordering a handwriting analysis before this proceeds further. 2 weeks later, the analysis came back. Forgery. Dennis had faked his father's signature. The guardianship petition was denied. Dennis was charged with fraud and elder abuse. Patricia got her house back, her accounts unfrozen, her life returned. And I realized something that knocked me sideways. The system could work. Not always, not reliably, but when the right people paid attention, justice was possible. Maybe that applied to people too. Maybe Ethan could actually change, not because change was guaranteed, but because it was possible if someone paid attention and held him accountable. I went home that night and pulled out all his letters. Read them in chronological order, watching the evolution from desperate apology to genuine accountability to quiet growth. The latest one, from 2 weeks ago, said simply, I helped a woman keep her house today. Her son had tried the same thing I tried with you. When I saw the petition, I saw myself. It was the worst mirror I've ever looked into. But I stopped it. The lawyer withdrew the case when I pointed out all the legal violations. One person who won't go through what you did. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's something. I read it 3 times. Then I picked up my phone and did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I texted Ethan. Coffee. Saturday. 2 p.m., same place as last time. Don't be late. His response came in seconds. I'll be there. Saturday arrived cold and bright. I got to the cafe early, chose a table by the window, ordered tea I didn't drink. My hands shook as I waited. Ethan walked in at exactly 2 p.m., looking thinner than I remembered. Older. He'd cut his hair shorter, wore glasses I didn't recognize. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by khakis and a sweater that had seen better days. He sat down across from me without speaking, waiting for me to set the terms. I read your letter, I said, about the case you stopped. I've stopped 3 now, he said quietly. Once you know what to look for, the patterns are obvious. Manufactured urgency, exaggerated incompetence, financial motivation disguised as concern. He met my eyes. All the things I did to you. Yes. I can't undo it, he said. Can't take back the fear I caused or the damage I did. But I can make sure fewer people experience it. That's what I'm trying to do. I studied him looking for signs of performance, of manipulation, found only exhaustion and what looked like genuine remorse. Why? I asked. Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just guilt. He thought about it, really thought. Because I need to believe I'm more than the worst thing I've ever done. That I can be someone Harold wouldn't be ashamed of. His voice cracked. I destroyed our relationship. I can't fix that. But maybe I can become someone who would never do it again, to anyone. That's still about you, I pointed out. Your redemption, your peace of mind. You're right. He nodded slowly. But Marianne, isn't that how all change starts? You realize you're the villain in someone else's story, and you can either lean into it or fight like hell to rewrite yourself. Marianne, not Mom. The shift was deliberate, respectful, acknowledging that he'd lost the right to that intimacy. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said bluntly. I know. I may never be ready. I know that too. Then what are we doing here? I spread my hands. Why are we having coffee and pretending this could work? Because you texted me, Ethan said simply. You could have just kept ignoring the letters. But you reached out. That means something. Did it? I'd been asking myself that question for 3 days. I've been helping people fight guardianship abuse, I said. Seeing the same patterns you used played out in other families. And it made me realize something. What? That the system relies on isolation. On victims being too scared or ashamed to speak up. On families staying quiet about abuse because it's embarrassing to admit someone you love tried to destroy you. I leaned forward. I'm done being quiet. I'm done protecting your reputation by hiding what you did. He went pale but nodded. Okay. I'm joining the class action lawsuit against Philip Vance. I'm going to testify. It'll be public. Your name will come up. People will know what you tried to do. I understand. Do you? I challenged. Because this will hurt you, Ethan. Your career, your reputation, your fresh start. People will know you as the man who tried to steal his mother's house. Good, he said, surprising me. They should know. That's who I was. Maybe public accountability is part of how I become someone different. I hadn't expected that. Had been braced for resistance, for him to ask me to protect him one more time. I'm also going to write about it, I continued. An essay for Jennifer's advocacy newsletter, possibly a longer piece for a magazine. My story, including how my son was the one who attacked me. Do it, Ethan said. Please. If it helps even one person recognize the warning signs, it's worth whatever it costs me. I searched his face for resentment, for the old entitlement. Found neither. Who are you? I asked quietly. Because you're not the person who sat in that courtroom and lied about me. I'm trying not to be. He ran a hand through his hair. The therapist says I'm deconstructing the person I was and rebuilding someone I can actually respect. It's brutal. Some days I hate myself so much I can barely function. But I keep showing up because the alternative is staying the man who destroyed you. And I can't live with that. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you actually love me? Or do you just feel guilty? Ethan's eyes filled. Both. I love you desperately. Always have, even when I was hurting you. That's what makes it so sick. I did all of that to someone I love. That's not what love is supposed to look like. No, I agreed. It's not. I'm learning what healthy love actually means, he continued. Respect. Boundaries. Letting people make their own choices even when you disagree. It's harder than the twisted version I practiced, but it's real. And Sabrina? I asked, though I wasn't sure why it mattered. Remarried already. Some finance guy. I heard through mutual friends that she's already working on his mother's estate planning. He smiled bitterly. I was just practice for her real target. You chose her, I reminded him. You let her drive this. I did, which makes it my fault, not hers. She was always transparent about what she wanted. I'm the one who decided my mother's autonomy was worth sacrificing for it. The self-awareness should have felt satisfying. Instead, it just made me sad. For both of us. For what we'd been and could never be again. I need you to understand something, I said carefully. If we rebuild any kind of relationship, it won't look like before. You're not my son in the way you used to be. That person is dead. If we construct something new, it'll be smaller, more fragile, built on conditions and boundaries you don't get to negotiate. I understand. And if you violate those boundaries even once, we're done. Permanently. No second chances after the second chance. I won't, he said fiercely. I swear to you. Don't swear, I interrupted. Just do it. Prove it with behavior, not promises. He nodded, wiping his eyes. We finished our coffee talking about neutral things, the advocacy work, Patricia's case, the lawsuit against Vance, safe topics that didn't require us to navigate the minefield between us. As we stood to leave, Ethan hesitated. Can I ask one thing? Maybe. When the roses bloom in June, could I see them? I know it's months away, and I know I haven't earned it yet, but I'd like something to work toward. I thought about Harold's roses, the garden we'd built together, the space Ethan had tried to take from me. If you're still doing the advocacy work in June, still showing up to therapy, still respecting my boundaries, maybe, I said, but you have to earn it between now and then, every single day. I will, he promised. We walked out into the cold afternoon. At the curb before heading to our separate cars, Ethan turned back. Thank you, he said, for giving me a chance to try. Thank myself, I corrected. I'm doing this for me, not you, because I need to know if reconciliation is possible, not because you deserve it. Fair enough. I drove home through streets that felt more familiar than they had in months. My city, my life, my choice to navigate it however I wanted. The house welcomed me back with creaking floors and familiar shadows. I made tea, sat in Harold's chair, and thought about second chances. They were terrifying. Offering one to Ethan meant risking more hurt, more betrayal, More proof that some people couldn't change no matter how hard they tried. But refusing to offer one meant closing myself off from the possibility that people could grow, that damage could be repaired, that my son might actually become someone worthy of my trust again. Neither option was safe. Both were gambles. I chose the gamble that left room for hope. The months that followed established a rhythm. Coffee with Ethan every 2 weeks. Jennifer's reports on his advocacy work. Slow, careful conversations that built a foundation where trust might eventually grow. It wasn't smooth. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface. A comment Ethan made about my finances that crossed a boundary. A suggestion about my health that sounded too much like the old concern as control. Each time I called it out immediately. And each time, Ethan apologized, corrected course, did better next time. Progress wasn't linear, but it was real. The class action lawsuit moved forward. I gave a deposition in April, telling my story to a room full of attorneys. Answered questions about the fear, the isolation, the systematic way Philip Vance had built cases on manufactured incompetence. Ethan's name came up. I didn't protect him. Told the truth about his role, his lies, his motivation. Afterward, he texted me, "Thank you for being honest about what I did. I know it cost you something to say it out loud again." It had, but not as much as staying silent would have. May arrived with warm breezes and the first hints of roses budding. I spent more time in the garden, preparing for the June bloom. Each day, I checked the bushes, watched the buds swell, waited for the moment they'd open. Harold used to say that roses required patience. You couldn't force them to bloom. You could only create the conditions and trust the process. Maybe relationships were the same. Patricia called one afternoon, her voice bright. "I wanted you to know I'm selling the house, my choice this time, moving to a retirement community near my daughter in Florida. Not because anyone forced me, but because I want to." "That's wonderful," I said, meaning it. "None of this would have been possible without you. I'd be in some facility right now, Dennis would have my house, and I'd have lost everything." She paused. "You saved my life, Marianne. You saved your own life by fighting back. I just helped." After we hung up, I thought about that. About how helping Patricia had helped me. About how turning my trauma into purpose had given me a reason to keep going when staying in bed felt easier. Survival wasn't enough. Purpose made survival worth it. June arrived right on schedule, and just like Harold had designed them, the roses bloomed. Pink and white and yellow, filling the garden with color and scent. I photographed them obsessively, sent pictures to Carol, to Jennifer, to Patricia in Florida. And on the first Saturday in June, I sent one to Ethan with a message. 2 p.m. tomorrow. Come see the garden. He arrived exactly on time, standing at the gate with the same uncertainty he'd brought to every coffee meeting. "Come in," I said. We walked through the garden together, neither of us speaking. Ethan stopped at Harold's rose bushes, reaching out to touch a bloom, then pulling back. "It's okay," I said. "You can touch them." He cupped a yellow rose gently, the way you'd hold something precious. "They're beautiful. Dad would be proud you kept them going." "He would." I paused. "He'd be disappointed in what you became, but I think he'd be cautiously hopeful about what you're trying to become." Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I hope so." We sat on the garden bench, the same bench where Sabrina had once delivered her ultimatum. But today, the threats were gone. Just two damaged people trying to figure out if healing was possible. "I'm not going to say I forgive you," I said finally. "I don't. Not fully. Maybe not ever. I know. But I'm willing to see where this goes. Keep meeting, keep building, see if something worth saving grows out of the wreckage." "That's more than I deserve," Ethan said quietly. "It's not about what you deserve. It's about what I need. And I need to believe that people can change, that my son can become someone I'm proud of again." I looked at him directly. "Can you?" "I'm trying," he said. "Every single day, I'm trying." "Then keep trying, and maybe someday, the trying will be enough." We sat in the garden until the light faded and the roses glowed pale in the dusk. Not reconciled exactly, but not enemies either. Something between. Something new. And maybe that was okay. Because life wasn't about perfect endings. It was about surviving the hard parts and deciding what to build from the pieces. I'd survived. I'd fought. I'd protected myself when nobody else would. And now, carefully, cautiously, I was learning to let someone back in. Not because he'd earned unconditional trust, but because I'd earned the right to choose my own risks. The roses would bloom again next year, and the year after that. As long as I tended them, they'd return. Maybe relationships worked the same way. Harold's garden had taught me that. And standing here with Ethan in the fading light, surrounded by roses that had survived winter and bloomed anyway, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could survive this too. Not unchanged, not undamaged, but alive, growing, blooming in our own scarred, complicated way. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined, but it was real. And after everything, real was all I needed.